Chapter 85. Chapter 85. No more Qing clan. Qing Ji went all out. He wanted to cut out a path of blood and return later to claim his vengeance. Theoretically, even if there were 3 of him, he would still be no match for either Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan, what more now that the 2 were working together. However, if a martial artist of gushing spring tear threw all caution away and went all out, it was still a very scary thing. Not even Zhu Hexian or Zhang Weishan dared to jump into a head-on clash with Qing Jiyu. They did not want to be dragged down together with the latter after all. Furthermore, how long could he last after throwing aside all caution? They only needed to stall him for a while, and after his burst of energy was exhausted, Qing Jiyu's battle prowess would naturally take a drastic drop, and by that time, it'd be extremely easy to defeat him. "Little bastard, you'll definitely die. All the people in your Ling clan will die," Cheng Wenkun called out severely. As long as Qing Jiyu managed to escape with his life, then the Ling clan would definitely be eliminated. Unless Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan planned to stand guard at the Ling clan residence for the rest of their lives. "Noisy!" Ling Han gave a cold humph, and his foot stamped down firmly. "Pah!" And Qing Wenkun's entire head was stamped into pulp. Blood spurted out in a gush, and the headless body struggled for quite some time before its movements ceased. This scene struck all the spectators speechless, as they thought that this young man really had guts of steel. Killing a man was not impossible, but the scary thing was how coldly he had done such a deed. With one stamp of his foot, Chen Wenkun's head was smashed into pulp, yet there was no change of expression on his face. It was just too gruesome. "This brat from the Ling clan has the qualifications to become a ruler to never be merciful towards his enemies, and kill them ruthlessly. That's right, a merciful person, no matter how talented they are, would never live very long. But when I understood that, I was already over 30 years old, and this brat from the Ling clan is currently only 17 years old. He's really impressive." Hu Niu's eyes were bright. She had the instincts of a wild beast, and could keenly sense the killing intent emanating from Ling Han. She was both afraid and excited, for it was a familiar feeling to her. She wriggled around, and really wanted to pounce to Ling Han's side, but because both her arms and legs were tied up, she could only struggle around pointlessly. Though Ling Han had killed one of the culprits responsible, his rage did not decrease in the slightest. The miserable and humiliated appearance of his father and his clansmen could not be removed from his mind's eye, so his killing intent burned even more strongly. His stare fixed upon Qing Jiyu. This was another culprit, or it could be claimed that he's the chief culprit of this entire calamity. Because if it had not been for Qing Jiyu, how would the Qing clan have dared to assault the Ling clan? He definitely must kill this fiend with his own hands. "Get out of my way!" he shouted loudly, and flew forward in a charge towards Qing Jiyu. Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan were both flabbergasted. They were about to stop Ling Han, so that he would not be embroiled in such a dangerous situation, yet Ling Han shouted, "I want to take down this old dog on my own, don't the 2 of you interfere." His countenance was determined, and did not allow either of them the chance to refuse. Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan could only step back, but they still prepared themselves. As soon as they saw Ling Han in danger, they would definitely step in and give him a hand, even if they would be rebuked by Ling Han later. Ling Han stimulated the lone wolf's blood, and his prowess, which was initially at the 8th layer of element gathering tier, was further upgraded. However, due to the fact that he had not suffered any debilitating injuries, the upgrade from lone wolf's blood was not too big, and only allowed his battle prowess to reach the peak period of the 8th layer of element gathering tier. But together with the rapid dance of 5 flashes of sword chi, and the shocking electricity sword arts, his might was still something to be feared. Yet Qing Jiyu did not feel a single bit of fear. Giving a light snort, he struck repeatedly with his palms, which all transformed into gigantic hands formed of origin power, striking towards Ling Han. These gigantic hands of origin power were extremely solid, and easily crushed the incoming flashes of sword chi, fully displaying the might of a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier. Ga, little bastard, what you're doing now is only seeking your own death. Qing Jiyu was extremely pleased. He could tell that whether it was Zhu Hexian, or Zhang Weishan, or the various parties of the Yuan city, they had all actually come because of Ling Han. Thus, as long as he managed to take down Ling Han, he'd be able to take him hostage and escape this siege. When he was finally safe, he would of course kill Ling Han with a single palm strike and thus achieve his vengeance, and would never again return to this place in his lifetime. Humph! Today will be the day of your death! Ling Han hissed, waving his sword repeatedly, the sword chi of his attacks seeming like rainbows. However, the power gap between himself and Qing Jiyu was still too big. With one clap of the gigantic hand formed of origin power from Qing Jiyu, he could feel his internal organs trembling due to the impact. But because he had already learned the ability of Body of Dead Tree, and also possessed the indestructible Heaven Scroll to help him recover his wounds, he only looked miserable. However, in truth, the repeated attacks actually helped to further stimulate the lone wolf's blood, and allowed his power to increase even further. Still, no matter how big the power upgrade was, it was impossible for his power to break through to Gushing Spring Tier. Ling Han frowned. The space in his dantian was now abnormally big, so his ability to last in battle was something to be feared, and together with the ability of self-recovery from the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he could easily wait for Qing Jiyu to drive himself to death with exhaustion. But he was acting out of revenge now, and to drag this battle out for such a long time. He could not wait, and neither could Ling Dongxing. Moreover, he did not want Ling Dongxing to worry any longer about him. In this case, Ling Han's gaze steeled, and without an ounce of hesitation, he communicated with the Black Tower. He wanted to use the blessing of the Black Tower to strengthen himself, and increase his battle prowess by an entire tier. Black Tower, come, give me power! Hum! Within his dantian, the Black Tower gave a light tremble, and a mysterious power emanated from it as it started droning. Hum! This power gushed out within Ling Han's body, and increased his cultivation level at an extremely rapid rate. 5th layer of element gathering tier, 6th layer, 7th layer. Within the time for him to take a single breath, his cultivation level had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, and continued to further increase after that, finally stopping at the 4th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. It had completely increased his cultivation level with a massive upgrade of a whole tier. What? Having sensed the abominable increase in power within Ling Han, Qing Jiyu, Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan all felt as if their eyeballs were going to pop out due to this tremendous shock. How was this possible? A martial artist in the 4th layer of element gathering tier actually instantaneously increased his own cultivation level by an entire tier. He truly deserved the name of alchemy genius. Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan immediately thought that Ling Han must have swallowed some kind of alchemical pill to achieve such a power upgrade, and they could not help the admiration and reverence they felt towards Ling Han's abilities as an alchemist increasing. Whether there existed such an alchemical pill in this world, the two old men did not even have a moment of doubt. They had already come to the stage that they would blindly trust Ling Han's abilities as an alchemist. Damn you! Qing Ji roared, and his palms struck repeatedly. One after another, gigantic hands of origin power came to life and headed towards Ling Han. Ling Han gave a humph. His left hand curled into a fist and flew forward in his own attack. Only his power had been upgraded to Gushing Spring Tier, so he still could not give form to his origin power. But that was all right. The power of the 4th layer of Gushing Spring Tier would absolutely dominate the 1st layer, so with a single punch, the green-colored gigantic hand formed of origin power instantly shattered. Ling Han had already charged forward, and with a wave of his sword 5 flashes of sword chi flew forward. Pooh! There instantly appeared 5 sword wounds on Qing Jiyu's chest, causing his chest to become a gory scene of blood and flesh. The wounds were so deep that even his bones and internal organs could faintly be seen. Old dog, hand over your life, Ling Han said in a deep voice. Little bastard, you only forcibly increased your power to Gushing Spring Tier, but how much power would you actually be able to show? I will definitely be able to kill you! Qing Ji released a furious roar. His hands moved continuously as he used the secret art of the Qing clan, expert armed fist. Unfortunately, though he had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, and was now able to cultivate black-grade martial arts techniques, the problem was that the Qing clan did not even possess yellow-grade high-level martial arts techniques. Where would they have been able to get their hands on a black-grade martial arts technique? This expert armed fist was only a yellow-grade mid-level technique, so its power was very limited. There was no way it would be able to compensate for the power gap between the first and fourth layer of Gushing Spring Tier. Ling Han smiled coldly. If an ordinary martial artist did forcibly increase his own cultivation level by a whole tier, he would indeed be unable to control such terrifying power, because such an upgrade was too enormous. But he was different. In his last life, his cultivation level had been of Heaven Tier, so what could a mere fourth layer of Gushing Spring Tier count as? Ling Han waved his sword in a powerful barrage of attacks, his sword chi seeming like rainbows, completely dominating Qing Jiyu. The fourth layer of Gushing Spring Tier against the first layer, that was going to be a one-sided battle in the first place. Pang! Ling Han raised his foot and aimed a kick at Qing Jiyu's chest. Ka ka ka! The sound of bones breaking and fracturing was heard. At least 4 of Qing Jiyu's ribs had broken, and his dantian was completely shattered as his body slid to right in front of Ling Dongxing. Kneel! Ling Han commanded coldly. Nonsense! Qing Jiyu shouted furiously. Even if he was killed, he would never lower his head in front of his enemy. You have no choice! Ling Han waved his sword. Pooh Piu! 2 splatters of blood appeared, and Qing Jiyu's foot tendons had been torn, and he could not help his legs from bending as he knelt down in front of Ling Dongxing. Little beast, even if I become a ghost, I will not spare you! Qing Jiyu spat out blood. He knew that he would definitely die today, so he did not even think of begging for mercy. His eyes were sharp as daggers as he wanted nothing more than to stab Ling Han to death with his eyes alone. Father, this person is yours! Ling Han calmed himself. He knew that Ling Dongxing wanted even more to kill this enemy with his own hands. All right. Ling Dongxing's face was filled with killing intent. He recalled how his clansmen were killed right in front of his very eyes, as if they were mere animals to be slaughtered. Their blood had painted the whole Ling clan residence red, and their bodies lay everywhere. His eyes instantly turned red, and taking the sword that Ling Han handed over to him, he immediately struck with a stab. Pooh! The sharp sword stabbed right into his chest, and Qing Jiyu glared at Ling Dongxing with utmost unwillingness. His mouth opened and closed a few times, as if he wanted to say something, but only blood gurgled out of his mouth, his head slanted to one side, and he was dead. Ling Dongxing gave a kick to the body of Qing Jiyu and the corpse flew some distance away. He raised his face to the skies and released an enraged roar. From today onwards, there would be no more Qing clan in Grey Cloud Town. Chapter 86. Chapter 86. Lu Yutong breaks through. Under the siege and assault of so many different parties, how could the Qing clan resist? They were instantly wiped out. Perhaps there may be a few who have fortunately escaped, but with Ling Han's current status in Diyuan City, the survivors of the Qing clan would be ultimately detested by all. They'd have to keep running and hiding, or they'd definitely be apprehended and delivered straight to the Ling clan. Who did not want to befriend Ling Han? There were not many members of the previously flourishing Ling clan who survived. Thus, Qi Yongyi and the others did not leave immediately after eliminating the Qing clan. They left behind their people to assist the Ling clan in taking control of the situation. But after such a battle, most likely no other party within the jurisdiction of the Diyuan city would dare to make an enemy of the Ling clan. Previously, more than 100 different parties of varying power and might came to Ling Han's aid, so who would not be terrified of seeing a repeat of this scene? All the properties of the Qing clan naturally fell into the ownership of the Ling clan. However, because the Qing clan had long been forced into economically dire straits, they were actually almost destitute. However, their minerals still existed, and so did their shop lots. With proper management, these properties would definitely be able to generate a massive income for the Ling clan. After staying at the Ling clan residence for about a day, Qi Yongyi and the others excused themselves and departed. They were about to set off towards Huyang Academy, and since Ling Han would be going to the same place very soon, they did not depart with heavy hearts. After all, they'd be able to see each other again in a few days' time. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong entered seclusion in preparation to break through to Gushing Spring Tier, for she felt that she was really too useless. At a time when Ling Han needed his little female attendant the most, she couldn't even do anything to help him, causing her to feel very dissatisfied with her current ability. Thus, as soon as the danger was over, she immediately began the process of breaking through. Ling Han also needed to stay for a while longer to help take care of some of the clan matters, so he decided to wait until Lu Yutong had broken through to Gushing Spring Tier before taking Ling Zixian and Hu Niu with them to Huyang Academy. The first item on the agenda was naturally the funerals of the clansmen of the Ling clan. Too many people had died, merely the funerals alone took 7 days. Moreover, because too many of their clansmen had died, there was a need to replenish their manpower by a massive amount, or it would not be possible to manage so many different properties. Ling Han was not of much help. He was an expert in alchemy and martial arts, but in such matters, he was completely inexperienced. Thankfully, Qi Yongyi and the others left behind many of their own people to assist, and had promised that they would wait until the Ling clan recovered before calling those people back. In the meantime, Qin Fenglai came once, bringing some news to Ling Han. Qin Pingzhu had indeed had a slip of the tongue after drinking too much, and the incident of Hang Zhan's murder was known by someone else. That person, after much hesitation, finally decided to go to Stone Wolf's sect to tell the secret so that he'd be able to gain some benefits. Who knew that he actually encountered Qin Fenglai, and after Qin Fenglai discovered the whole story, he immediately killed the man to keep him from divulging the secret. Qin Fenglai had come deliberately to express his good faith. The current Qin Fenglai no longer dared to have any thoughts of betraying Ling Han. How many parties stood behind Ling Han? Unless Qin Fenglai had lost his senses, otherwise he would not dare to make trouble. Thus, Ling Han gave him the complete medicine formula to resolve his state of madness as a reward. On the 9th day, an extremely powerful wave of power swept out from the inner courtyard of the Ling clan residence, and the terrifying pressure caused many elite martial artists of Gushing Spring Tier to feel as if their hearts and souls were pounding. Lu Yutong had broken through. Ling Han had been sitting in the middle of the courtyard in the midst of cultivation when a shapely figure flew towards him before stopping at his side. It was Lu Yutong. "Not bad, 8 days and you've broken through, your talent is truly not bad." Ling Han smiled and nodded. Though he had previously given Lu Yutong much valuable experience in battle, but to be able to break through completely within a mere 8 days, Lu Yutong's talent in the field of martial arts was indeed extremely high. Lu Yutong nodded, and in a firm voice she said, "In the future, I will definitely not become your burden. Instead, I will be a helper you can depend on." "Haha, I believe you," Ling Han said with a laugh. After some thought, he said, "Since you've broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, then I'll teach you the 3rd level of cultivation technique of the 3 mysterious arts. Once you've mastered that, you will never need to worry about falling unconscious again." And Lu Yutong nodded, appearing slightly excited. This was a heaven-grade cultivation technique, and for a martial arts maniac like herself, it was an irresistible temptation. The two of them returned to the inner chambers, and Ling Han naturally again underwent a test of his own while he had been guiding her in the cultivation technique, causing his emotions to ripple continuously. This young girl was indeed a demon. After much difficulty, he finally finished guiding her in the cultivation technique. Ling Han once again stepped out and continued to sit cross-legged in the courtyard. Previously, the Black Tower allowed him to temporarily obtain the power of Gushing Spring Tier, but it only lasted for 1 hour. And the next time he wanted to make use of the power of the Black Tower again, he would have to wait until he has successfully broken through to Gushing Spring Tier. However, when he has finally broken through to Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to gain a preliminary understanding of the secrets behind the Black Tower. He had no idea what kind of surprises awaited him then. Additionally, Ling Han had also achieved the 5th layer of element gathering tier by now. The reason why he had been able to break through so quickly had been because after the blessing of the Black Tower had been used up, though the power he gained very quickly disappeared, it seemed as if a small portion of it had been left within his body. After a few days of digestion, this power now belonged completely to him alone. Initially, he had only required about a month to complete accumulating enough energy to break through to the next layer, but now that he had obtained such benefits, naturally everything went smoothly, and as to be expected, he had successfully broken through. With the stimulation of the 5 elements' origin nuclei, his power would soar to the 9th layer of element gathering tier. If he fought with Qi Yongyi again now, he should be able to achieve an absolute victory. My current battle prowess should be about 14 stars, right? Ling Han mumbled to himself. In the field of martial arts, there were many geniuses who could disregard the gap between their own cultivation level and their opponent to challenge someone much stronger than them. Their actual battle prowess did not correspond to their actual cultivation level, and so cultivation level was completely unable to measure the battle prowess of a genius. As a result, the world of martial arts possessed a different way to measure battle prowess, named as battle stars. For example, if a genius whose actual cultivation level was only 4th layer of element gathering tier was able to battle evenly with an opponent of the 6th layer of element gathering tier, his battle prowess would be 6 stars. And, within the 9th layer of element gathering tier, Li Dongyu's battle prowess was the weakest, so he only had 10 stars. Jin Wuji should have 11 stars, and Qi Yongyi, due to using the Son of Heaven fist technique together with 3 flashes of fist chi, should be able to reach 13 stars, Ling Han thought. However, there were too many variables that could affect battle prowess. For example, if Bailey Tingyun wielded the Staff of Destruction, his battle prowess would be enough to soar to 11 stars, but without this staff, his battle prowess would only be about 9 stars. He wouldn't even be able to match Li Dongyu. Some people were the emotional type. Under great rage, or after drinking too much, their battle prowess would shoot up. As a result, while cultivation levels did not change, battle stars were a variable. Only a real-time situation would be able to reveal how many stars would someone reach at their best. In my last life, although my cultivation level was the peak period of Heaven tier, my battle prowess should be only about 9 stars, or 10 stars at most. I wonder what level could those freaks have reached? Ling Han shook his head. In his last life, he had spent his time either continuously concocting alchemical pills, or secluding himself to break through to the next cultivation level. Even when he had reached the highest he could go in terms of cultivation level, he still did not seek out the other 6 powerful warriors of Heaven tier for a serious spar. When he recalled that, he could not help feeling a bit regretful. And it was at this moment that the sound of a commotion was heard from outside. It quickly transmitted over to the inner court where he was, and became closer and closer. Pug! After only a short while, the commotion had spread to this courtyard. The door was heavily kicked open, and a tall, slender young man entered. This person had an imposing appearance. He was dressed in embroidered clothing, a sword hanging from his waist. His expression was one of extreme arrogance, as if he wanted nothing more than to have his nostrils facing the heavens, making it seem as if coming here had been an exercise of utmost humility for him. Behind him followed a group of servants of the Ling clan. They were all underlings Qi Yongyi, and the others had left behind to serve Ling Han. All of them were covered in dirt, as if they had just been beaten up. Some even had their arms broken. This one had not come with good intentions. Chapter 87. Chapter 87, Hubo. This young man was, in Gushing Spring tier. Ling Han's eyes narrowed. This person appeared to be only about 23 or 24 years old, yet he had already stepped into Gushing Spring tier, and had even reached the peak period of the 1st layer. In Rain Country, this kind of person would definitely be considered a genius. Could this be Feng Yan? In the area of Deyuan City's control, if you were to ask what enemies he had, then it could only be Feng Luo, who had suffered losses twice by his hand, Could that guy have asked his brother to come back? No, according to rumors, Feng Yan was already in the third layer of gushing spring tier. However, this person was really too tyrannical. He had obviously forced his way here, and when someone dared to stop him, he actually acted to wound them. Young Master Han, this person said he wanted to see Miss Lu, and forced his way through. Some of us tried to stop him, yet were killed by him in their attempt. One of the attendants following behind this young man immediately said to Ling Han, his face filled with grief. Ling Han could not help his anger from rising. Barging his way through was already arrogant enough actually dared to kill? This guy, just because he was in gushing spring tier, was actually lawless to such a point. Go, I command you to invite Yutong out here. This young man said to Ling Han as if he were ordering around a servant. Ling Han looked at him, and said in a deep voice, You killed my people! So what? They are only lowly dogs, so what if 1,000 or 10,000 die? The young man said indifferently, instantly causing the others to be filled with righteous indignation, wanting nothing more than to kill this guy 100 times if they could with their sharp gazes alone. Ling Han gave a humph and said, In my eyes, you're lower than even a dog. The young man was stunned for a moment before laughing loudly, and said, A mere martial artist in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, and you actually dare to insult me? Ha ha ha, you probably don't know who Hu Bo am, right? I don't care who you are. Ling Han had already leaped forwards, and with a ding, his sword had left its sheath. The sword flew forward, as quick as lightning. How dare you! The young man who had proclaimed himself Hu Bo instantly revealed a furious expression. His right hand opened up and origin power formed a golden palm, intending to grab hold of Ling Han's sword. Ling Han's right hand moved, and 5 flashes of sword chi appeared together. Shwa 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 shwa. 6 sword images slashed as one, and the large hand formed from origin power was instantly sliced into pieces. Ling Han pushed forward, his sword aiming directly for Hu Bo's throat. 5 flashes of sword chi? Hu Bo could not help releasing a surprised gasp. He once again struck forward with a palm, and another large hand of origin power blasted forward, halting Ling Han's further advance. He could not help a cold smile turning up the corners of his lips, and said, I never thought that a tiny place like Grey Cloud Town could actually produce a genius that managed to form 5 flashes of sword chi. Moreover, you are obviously only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet the prowess you've shown can be compared to the 9th layer. You should have about 13 battle stars, right? What battle stars? Those people who had followed him were all at a loss. They had never heard such a phrase before. But in front of me, no matter how many battle stars you have, it is completely useless. Hu Bo shook his head. The gap between cultivation levels is too big. If I did fight with my full power, I'd be able to kill you in one move. He paused for a moment, then said, I treasure talent, so I will give you an opportunity to live. As long as you become my underling, I not only will spare you, I'll even be able to give you ultimate godly techniques. If Lu Yutong had been able to hear this, she'd definitely laugh her head off. Who was Ling Han? Someone who could casually take out a heaven-grade cultivation technique. So, what kind of cultivation technique did you plan to give him that deserved to be called ultimate godly techniques? Kneel down and accept your death, and I can give you a swift end. Ling Han replied back. Hu Bo was enraged and said, Brat, being arrogant just because you're a little bit talented is not a good habit. Since you deliberately seek your own death, then let me help you. This time, he made the first move. As his hands moved, his attacks swept out in waves, and his battle prowess had improved to a whole new level as compared to previously. However, it was still only an increase of 1 star. Of course, this star was applicable only to gushing spring tier. Ling Han was not afraid. Indeed, his battle prowess was not able to reach the level of gushing spring tier, but his defense was awesome. The body of Dead Tree allowed him to withstand tremendously powerful attacks repeatedly without suffering any injury, and the indestructible Heaven Scroll allowed him to instantaneously recover whatever wounds he did suffer. It was enough to qualify him for this battle. The two martial artists clashed, and flashes of sword chi soared to the heavens, origin power gushing all over the place. This can't be, young Master Han was actually so powerful? He can actually fight on even grounds with a powerful warrior of gushing spring tier. What does this count as? Didn't young Master Han just slaughter one a few days ago? But that old guy had just broken through, so he definitely couldn't have been as powerful as this one. Murmurs rose up among the crowd, and they were all flabbergasted at Ling Han's might. He was undoubtedly only in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet could actually fight on even grounds with a person in gushing spring tier. This was practically unbelievable. However, gushing spring tier was still gushing spring tier, after all. After a couple of exchanges of blows, blood not only stained the corners of Ling Han's mouth, the skin all over his body had also cracked, dripping blood. And this was because he had learnt the body of dead tree ability. Otherwise, suffering such a bout of assault, even his bones would long have been shattered. Facing such a scene, the others could only feel a deep sense of admiration and reverence. This was the gap of a whole tier, yet Ling Han could still manage to fight until such a point. If the two fighters had the same cultivation level, then Ling Han most likely would have been able to kill his opponent in one move. Ling Han's condition was not as bad as it looked. With the circulation of the indestructible heaven scroll, the wounds that he had suffered were actually recovering very quickly. His battle prowess not only did not weaken, it became even stronger with the use of the lone wolf's blood. After such a long battle, he had also obtained a rough grasp of his opponent's attacks. Every secret behind his opponent's moves was practically revealed to him. Shio! His sword suddenly shot forward and 5 flashes of sword chi moved unhindered, as if it was the writing brush of a god, aiming straight for Hu Bo's chest. Hu Bo was extremely shocked. Although all of his moves had their own weaknesses, but how could they have been seen through by a mere martial artist of element gathering tier? But that was exactly the truth of what happened. This slash from Ling Han aimed straight at his weak point, and was heading towards him. In a moment of desperation, he could only raise his hands and place them in a block in front of his chest. Pooh! A spurt of blood sprayed. A wound had appeared on his right palm, and blood was pouring from it. The two fighters had been fighting so long, and finally Ling Han managed to score a hit on his opponent. Hua! The people around them exploded with shocked exclamations, obviously extremely excited. Although Hu Bo had only suffered a single injury, and experienced a little bit of loss, but the crucial point was that he was in gushing spring tier. A martial artist at the grand level of gushing spring tier was actually successfully wounded by a martial artist in element gathering tier. No matter where this happened, it would be seen as a feat of impressive heights. Hu Bo's face was twisted into a malevolent expression. This stab had not harmed him much, and he had only bled a little, so it was not a serious injury. Yet his hatred for Ling Han had reached astronomical levels. A mere commoner from such a desolate place, and he actually dared to harm him, a member of one of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, the 7th young master of the Hu clan. If such a piece of news were to spread out, how would he be able to continue facing his circle of friends? Additionally, wasn't this young man's talent too scary? If he really did grow to gushing spring tier, how strong would he be? He could not allow Ling Han to live. Hu Bo had developed a serious intention to kill Ling Han. Previously, even if he had really meant to kill Ling Han, that was the same as a human being casually killing a bug. It was not something that would be considered seriously. But now he really intended to kill Ling Han and put his all into the effort. He slowly drew his sword and said, "You do have some ability, but this is as far as you can go." Because he was in gushing spring tier, he was able to use black-grade martial arts techniques. Chapter 88. Chapter 88, Becoming Enemies. Hu Bo's hand held his drawn sword. His status was a noble one. He was in the uppermost social class below the imperial family of Rain Country, yet had now actually suffered an injury from someone else. This had inflicted a heavy blow on his self-esteem, and there was no way his ego could accept such a thing happening, so his desire to erase this future ruler increased even further. 5 flashes of sword chi, that could be considered a strong enough existence among rulers. You will not be able to kill me today, nor will you be able to do so in the future. You will only die by my hand, Ling Han said deeply. From the moment Hu Bo had committed murder within the grounds of the Ling clan residence, that already meant this man's fate was sealed. Not even the gods would be able to change his fate. Because this was a man he intended to kill. Hu Bo, what are you doing here? Xiao! A figure flashed into the vicinity, and Lu Yutong had appeared. She had been in the midst of analyzing the third level of cultivation technique from the three mysterious arts, but hearing the commotion outside becoming louder, she immediately realized that something was not right, and thus immediately leaped out. Her beautiful face was filled with anger, and because she saw that Ling Han was covered with blood, her heart could not help tightening as a powerful killing intent immediately rose to life within her. Anyone who dared to injure Ling Han, they were all unforgivable. However, this Hu Bo was the seventh young master of the Hu clan, and was of the same social status as herself. Moreover, he was even stronger than her, so she could not act rashly, or she could possibly cause Ling Han's death. This was something she was even more unwilling to see. Yu Tong! Hu Bo immediately restrained his killing intent, smiled and said, Your trip this time took quite a few months. I was very worried about you, so I deliberately came over to escort you back. I don't need you to meddle in my affairs, Lu Yutong said coldly. She pointed at the door and said, You can get lost now. Yutong, it can't be that you've fallen in love with this brat, right? Hu Bo's gaze swept over to Ling Han, uncontrollable jealousy brimming in them. Then, this brat is definitely going to die. You dare to take one more step? Lu Yutong slanted her body to stand in front of Ling Han, an icy expression on her beautiful face. Hun, it can't be that you've really been captivated by him. Hu Bo was about to be driven mad with rage. He and Lu Yutong were both members of the 8 great clans of the imperial city, and in order not to be pushed around easily by the imperial family, it was common for the 8 great clans to ally with each other through marriage. After Lu Yutong was discovered to possess such powerful talent in the field of martial arts, the members of the other 7 great clans all started brimming with desire to have her marry into their respective clans, and Hu Bo was one of her many admirers and pursuers. And personally, he was very satisfied, because not only did Lu Yutong possess a terrifying talent in martial arts, she was also one of the twin stunning pearls of the imperial city. What man would not want to marry her? But he had never imagined that she had just stepped out for a short while, and her heart and soul was captured by a wild brat. A mere country bumpkin. I want to kill him! I want to kill this little bastard! He roared with rage, and with one leap, pounced towards Ling Han. How dare you! Lu Yutong stepped forward to parry. Honk! The aura of gushing spring tear exploded. Yee! Hu Bo gasped in shock, a surprised expression on his face. Gushing spring tear! You've broken through to gushing spring tear! There was no way he wouldn't be surprised. Although it was common knowledge that Lu Yutong was extremely talented in the field of martial arts, but no matter how talented she was, she should have only been able to break through to gushing spring tear after she has passed 20 years old. Moreover, a few months ago Lu Yutong had only been in the 8th layer of element gathering tier, so theoretically, it would already have been difficult enough for her to reach the peak period of the 9th layer of gushing spring tear by now. And to break through to gushing spring tear, she should at least have needed another 1 or 2 years to settle. Though power could be forcibly increased with the aid of alchemical pills, it was impossible to fake one's aura. This was definitely the aura of gushing spring tear, and from the feel of it, she had just broken through quite recently. Genius! She really was a genius! Yutong, I blamed you wrongly! He quickly said. Being able to break through to gushing spring tear in such a short period of time, how could Lu Yutong have any spare time to get into a romantic relationship? She must have gotten some kind of fateful encounter here, and had been putting all her efforts into breaking through. This must be the reason why she had been staying here for such a long period of time. Get lost! Lu Yutong ignored his words, her palms moved, and a terrifying offensive power rose up. The symbol of gushing spring tear was origin power given form. With the claps of her palms, one after another, giant hands of origin power were formed, flying towards Hubo. And because Hubo felt that he was in the wrong, he did not dare to parry her attacks. He only kept dodging while pleading for mercy. But because he was at the peak period of the first layer of gushing spring tear, he was much more powerful than Lu Yutong. Moreover, Lu Yutong had just broken through, so there was no way she would be used to using the increased power that she possessed now, and he very easily dodged her attacks. And more importantly, though gushing spring tear allowed the martial artist to learn black-grade martial arts techniques, Lu Yutong had just broken through, so how would she have had the time to cultivate any? So she was even less of a threat to Hubo. Yutong, calm down. I'll leave, all right? When you return to the Imperial City, I'll look for you again. Hubo retreated, but before he left, he gave a cold glare to Ling Han and said, Brat, don't think that just because you're close to her, you're favored. Yutong is not someone you can have delusions about. If you dare, I will definitely tear you to pieces. Without waiting for Lu Yutong's reaction, his figure took a great leap, and he had already disappeared to a far-off distance. Lu Yutong chased after him for a few steps but then gave up. Hubo was much faster than her. I'm sorry! She raced back to Ling Han's side and said with deep remorse. Hubo had come to the Ling clan residence and killed so many people, yet she was unable to apprehend him. You don't have to apologize, that guy belongs to me. Ling Han humphed coldly. The current him indeed did not yet possess the ability to kill Hubo, but it would definitely not be too much of a wait. Lu Yutong knew that Ling Han was a man who kept his word, so she quickly said, The Hu clan is one of the 8 great clans of the Imperial City, and their power is at the same level as our Lu clan. They also possess a powerful warrior of spiritual pedestal tier as support. You definitely must not act rashly. Ling Han had already guessed that Hubo must have an exceptionally high social status. Otherwise, he would not have been qualified to pursue Lu Yutong. He nodded and said, Am I the rash type of person? Lu Yutong could not help but observe a moment of silence in tribute of the Hu clan. Although Ling Han was currently only an element-gathering tier, his talent in martial arts was higher than her own by 100-fold. And together with his achievements in the field of alchemy, the Hu clan have gained a powerful enemy this time. Though there were still 1,000 things left to do at the Ling clan, Ling Dongxing still forced Ling Han out of the Ling clan residence, commanding him to immediately set off to report at the Huyang Academy. After a moment of consideration, Ling Han realized that his staying here wouldn't help anything anyways, so he might as well set out. He and Lu Yutong brought Ling Zixian and Hu Niu with them. However, because Ling Zixian's parents had both died in the Great Slaughter previously, Ling Han still had to look for someone to take care of these 2 little girls after they had reached the Imperial City. Now, Hu Niu had slowly gotten accustomed to eating cooked meat, but she was still only interested in eating meat. She wouldn't even touch any kind of vegetable. But she was now exceptionally clingy towards Ling Han. Whenever there was time, she would lean against him like a kitten, resting her little head on his knee. Don't think that she had put away her wild nature though, because to other people, she was still extremely ferocious. But because of Ling Han, she had also become slightly closer to Lu Yutong and Ling Zixian. Or at least, she would not try to bite the 2 of them anymore. And Ling Han realized to his extreme shock that this wild little girl never seemed to be able to get full. No matter how much food they gave her, she would be able to easily consume it all. And after she had eaten some demonic beast meat, there actually appeared a spike in her cultivation level, and she quickly stepped into the 4th layer of body refining tier. She had obviously not awakened her spirit base yet, and she had never learned any kind of cultivation technique before. This caused Ling Han a great shock. Power would not simply appear without reason. For example, the origin power within the body of a martial artist had come from refining the spiritual qi around him. And Hu Niu did not practice any kind of cultivation, so her power had obviously not come through this channel. Then, it must have come from the food that she had eaten. Could this little girl be able to directly refine the food she ate into her own origin power? When this deduction arose in his mind, Ling Han could not help feeling astonished. What kind of terrifying ability was that? In order to prove the truth of this deduction, Ling Han and Lu Yutong kept hunting down demonic beasts for Hu Niu to eat her fill. Indeed, the more she ate, the faster her power grew. But there was a limit to it, because her stomach was not a bottomless pit after all. By the time the four of them reached the Imperial City, Hu Niu was shockingly already in the 6th layer of body refining tier. This was not as terrifying as Ling Han's own pace of cultivation, but it was enough of a great shock, because even now, she had not yet awakened her spirit base. Ling Han had a feeling that he had picked up a valuable treasure. Chapter 89. Chapter 89, Old Demon. After so many days, Hu Niu finally managed to learn a few words somehow. The word that she spoke the most was meat, and then it was kill, and also Ling Han. She only managed to learn these 3 phrases, which brought the total of her vocabulary up to only 4 words. But at least she now knew that Hu Niu was her name, and would raise her head in response when she heard it. She still did not like to walk on 2 legs, but Ling Han had a large influence on her, causing her to unknowingly imitate his actions. By the time the 4 of them reached the Imperial City, the wild little girl finally got used to walking on her legs. But when there was no one else, she would still be walking around on all 4s. And she was extremely fast, as if she was a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its cage. Her dislike for wearing clothes did not change though. A new suit of clothes, after only a mere few days, would be torn to shreds by her hands, causing Ling Han and Lu Yutong to feel very exasperated, though Ling Zixian was extremely envious of this, because Hu Niu would be able to frequently get new clothes. Entering the city actually required an entrance fee of a silver coin. Since there were 4 of them, they had to pay 4 silver coins. Though this was a paltry sum to Ling Han, but taking into consideration how many travelers entered and exited this city every day, the money that came merely from collecting entrance fees would definitely be an incredible wealth. It was indeed a good life being the emperor. I built this road, so if you want to enter you'll have to pay. It was completely fair. After the 4 of them entered the city, it happened to be noon, so they decided to find some place to have lunch first before going to report at the Huyang Academy. Meat! 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 Hu Niu sat down very earnestly, drool already starting to drip from her mouth. Ling Han did not look at the menu, and simply said to the waiter, "Just serve whatever's good, but there must be a lot of meat." "All right," the waiter replied before leaving. There were not many customers in the restaurant in the beginning, but as dish after dish of delicious food was served to their table, it was also soon nearing the time when majority of people would be having their meals. The number of customers in the restaurant gradually increased, making the atmosphere increasingly livelier. Hu Niu did not bother with using any chopsticks. She would simply reach out and grab onto a whole chicken or duck, and within a few moments, she would have completely devoured it. She really had a terrifyingly good appetite. "Aren't you scared of getting your hands dirty?" Ling Han shook his head. He had taught her who knew how many times, yet this wild little girl kept resenting the use of chopsticks because they were too troublesome to use. Hu Niu only gave a giggle in response before continuing to devour the food in front of her. Compared to her, Ling Zixian was much more refined. She would only take small bites, and when she smiled, there would be no sign of her teeth. She had already learnt the basic demeanor of a daughter from a noble house. "What a good-looking young girl!" An elderly voice was heard, causing both Ling Han and Lu Yutong to turn their heads to look at the speaker. It was an old man who seemed to be in his 60s. He was dressed in rich robes, and out of the 10 fingers on his hands, there were rings on 8 of them. He was obviously extremely wealthy. His eyes were focused entirely on Hu Niu and Ling Zixian. His stare was so intense that it seemed as if light could be seen from his eyes alone. "Are the 2 of you the parents of these 2 little girls?" the old man asked as he walked over, but he immediately introduced himself afterward. "I am Qingyun Xiang, the shopkeeper of the Four Seas business. I am quite well known." Lu Yutong shook her head, while Ling Han glanced a moment at this Qingyun Xiang, and said, "We are not their parents, just their relatives. Ling Zixian very obediently smiled at the old man, and addressed him as Grandpa, while Hu Niu only continued to think about eating. In her eyes, nothing was more important than eating meat. Qin Yunxiang seemed as if he liked these two little girls very much. He continued to babble on, causing Ling Zixian to break out continuously in laughter, while Hu Niu acted as if she hadn't heard him speak at all. At first, Ling Han only thought that this old man was especially fond of children, and so did not think too much about it. But the old man's gaze became increasingly odd, as if he was a wolf that had focused its eyes on two lambs. His eyes were so verdant that they were almost lit up, and Ling Han finally realized that they had encountered an old lecher, and this old lecher's favorite target was little girls. "Come, let Grandpa take a look at your palm lines." Qin Yunxiang could not hold himself back from stretching out a hand to catch hold of Ling Zixian's little hand, revealing his true colors of a lecherous molester. "Pa!" Ling Han reached out and caught hold of the old man's wrist, his gaze severe as he said, "Old guy, you're already so old, and yet you're still unwilling to behave?" Qin Yunxiang was not a martial artist, and as he was gripped by Ling Han's hand, he suddenly wailed from the pain of such a tight grasp. He only stopped when Ling Han flung him away, causing him to stumble and fall onto the ground. Raising his hand for a look, there shockingly appeared 4 finger marks on his wrist. They were so green that it looked like they were going to darken into a bruise soon. His expression had also darkened as he gained a new fear in his heart for Ling Han, yet he was unwilling to simply give up 2 such pretty, cute little girls. Thus, he said, "They're not your daughters anyways, why don't you just name a price?" A spark of killing intent flashed across Ling Han's expression, and he said, "Old lecher, if you dare say another word, I'll kill you." Qin Yunxiang was about to continue increasing his offer and try to convince Ling Han, but when he saw the killing intent on Ling Han's face, he could not help his heart shuddering. He no longer dared to continue making an issue out of it. He quickly turned the opposite direction and fled. However, he would not give up so easily as he thought. You don't know what's good for you. Then I'll just ask the people of the Earth and Water faction for help and snatch these 2 little girls from you." The old man staggered as he left, instantly causing the other customers in the restaurant to break out into raucous laughter. "Brother, that old guy is a famous lecher, and his main target are little girls. If it was not for the fact that he had always used money to get what he wants, who knows how many times he'd have already been beaten to death," one of the customers who recognized that old lecher said with a shake of his head. Ling Han did not take it too seriously, though. The old man was not a martial artist, so his social circle could only include ordinary people. His ability was naturally limited. If Qin Yunxiang had continued to persist, not knowing what was good for him, Ling Han would definitely not have been merciful. Hu Niu was very fast at eating her meat, as if she was afraid that someone would be fighting with her over it. By the time Ling Han and the others had all eaten their fill, she was still eating, and her speed had not slowed one bit. Seeing this scene caused the customers in the restaurant much amazement. They couldn't understand how the tiny stomach of this little girl was able to accommodate so much food. Finally, a bit over 2 o'clock, the little girl finally patted her stomach a few times with satisfaction. She squirmed into Ling Han's embrace, and very soon began to snore. She could eat a lot and sleep a lot. Ling Han stood up to pay the bill. Over 1,000 silver coins had been spent on this one meal. At least 90% of it was in Hu Niu's stomach, proving how much of a spendthrift this little girl was. Thankfully, because Ling Han had killed Hang Zhan, Ma Lang, and the others previously, there was no lack of money in his pocket. The 4 of them exited the restaurant and continued their journey to Huyang Academy. "There are 2 people who've been following us," Liu Yutong said to Ling Han, after they had walked for a while. Ling Han nodded and said, "I noticed. But I don't know if their target is our money, or us." If their target was them. A ferocious light flashed through his eyes. Without doubt, it was definitely the antics of that old lecher, Qin Yunxiang. If that really was so, then don't blame him for being merciless. "They're coming," Liu Yutong said softly. At the moment, the 2 of them had just walked into a remote little alley, with not one other person around them. This was of course what Ling Han had deliberately done. Two sturdy men quickly ran towards them. When they reached Ling Han, one of them tried to carry off Ling Zixian, while the other reached out towards Ling Han, intending to snatch away Hu Niu, who was still sleeping in his arms. These two sturdy men were not martial artists. They were only a bit stronger than normal people. After all, out of every 10 people, there would only be one that possessed the spirit base, so martial artists weren't really that common. Ling Han smiled. He not only did not resist, he even raised his arms a bit, allowing the man to easily snatch Hu Niu away from his hold. The man could not help being stunned for a moment. Such a reaction was something that he had never even considered would happen. Meanwhile, due to the movement, Hu Niu was awakened. She was like a wild beast, and possessed a very alert nature. When she discovered that she was held by an unfamiliar man, a ferocious light immediately shone in her eyes. Chapter 90. Chapter 90. Unwilling to give up his evil intentions. Though Hu Niu had yet to awaken her spirit base, she had already stepped into the 6th layer of body refining tier because of her continuous eating. What kind of concept was that? Ordinary adult men, even if there were 20 or 30 of them working together, could not possibly be able to match her. Discovering that she was in the hold of an unfamiliar man, Hu Niu's ferocious nature instantly flared up. Pa! Like a tiger waving its paw, her hand connected with the large man's face. Pooh! The large man's head slanted, and 7 teeth as well as a mouthful of blood was instantly spat out. He immediately fell onto the ground. Hu Niu somersaulted in midair and landed steadily in a crouch on the ground. Her mouth opened, revealing 2 canines. Her 4 limbs pushed off the ground at the same time, and like a fierce tiger that had finally escaped its confines, she pounced at the large man. Her hands pressed down on his shoulders, and her mouth was already lowering down in a bite at his throat. Ling Han hurriedly acted and picked up the wild little girl. He definitely did not want this little girl to kill. If she had, then all his and Lu Yutong's efforts would have been wasted. Even so, the large man that had been knocked down to the ground had already paled in fear. His throat released a shrill shriek. If they hadn't seen it or heard it themselves, it was really unbelievable that such a tall, sturdy man would actually be able to release such a sissy sound. The other large man was more fortunate. With a knife hand from Lu Yutong to his neck, he had instantly passed out. "If you scream once more, I'll kill you," Ling Han said. The large man hurriedly covered his mouth with his hands, as if he was a young maiden that had encountered a pervert. Ling Han placed Hu Niu back down. The wild little girl's ferocious nature was restrained with much difficulty, and she kept baring her teeth at the large man, giving out a low growl. The large man screamed again due to fear, but when he recalled Ling Han's threat, he hurriedly covered his mouth again. I am a disciple of the Earth and Water faction. If you know what's good for you, you'll let me go immediately," the large man threatened, though he did not look very confident. He was shuddering in fear even as he spoke, his face pale. Ling Han turned to look at Lu Yutong and asked, "What's the background of this Earth and Water faction?" "It's an underground party of the Imperial City. Because some things cannot be done publicly, even the 8 great clans would occasionally make use of the power of this party to do some dirty deeds," Lu Yutong said. She thought for a moment, then continued. "The faction chief of the Earth and Water faction seems to be named Yan Tian Du. He's in the spiritual ocean tier, and mingles very well with the upper-class parties of the Imperial City. In the field of martial arts, the lines between cult, faction, sect, association and society were very strictly drawn. To be able to possess the name of faction would require a powerful warrior of spiritual ocean tier as support." Ling Han gave an O and once again looked back at that large man as he said, "I don't care if you're Earth and Water faction or Heaven and Water faction. I ask a question, and you give me an answer. If I'm not pleased with your answer, then I will sever one of your limbs. You can count how many times can you afford my displeasure yourself." The large man's face paled and he hurriedly nodded without stopping. He was not really afraid of Ling Hanrather, he was afraid of Hu Niu. This little girl gave him the feeling that she was a fierce tiger, with absolutely no way to reason with her. Who would not be afraid of that? Qin Yunxiang sent you? Ling Han asked. Yes, yes. How many times have you helped him do such deeds? The large man hesitated for a moment, but when his eyes fell upon Hun Yo, he could not help shuddering. He hurriedly answered, I can't remember exactly how many times, but there should definitely be 10 times. There were actually as many as 10 times. Ling Han gave a humph and struck the large man's chest with his palm. Due to the shock wave from his origin power, he instantly crushed the man's heart. To help a villain commit evil, they deserve more than death. Lu Yutong had already developed a tacit understanding with him. She immediately struck forward with a stab of her sword and killed the man who had fallen unconscious. She then sheathed her sword and said, Just leave that old fiend to me, I will have people from my clan deal with him. Ling Han considered her words for a moment before nodding in agreement. He knew that Lu Yutong was acting in his best interests. After all, this was the imperial city, under the direct jurisdiction of the emperor. Even if it were the 8 great clans, they would have to think twice before doing something. If he killed someone right after he had arrived and this information that could be used against him was acquired by someone who intended him harm, this could possibly result in the thunderous rage of the imperial family. At that moment, not even Zhu Hexian and Zhang Weishan would be able to protect him. Rain country belonged to the Qi clan, after all. However, as for these 2 little foot soldiers in front of them, even if they died, there would be no one to pay special attention to this matter. Qin Yunxiang was the boss of a business, so his influence could either be small or large. For Lu clan, as one of the 8 great clans, it'd only be too easy if they intended to deal with a businessman. Moreover, Qin Yunxiang did not have a clean history, so just randomly collecting information on some of his bad deeds would be enough to ruin him completely. Ling Han too had not taken such a minor character seriously, so he naturally would not reject Lu Yutong's kindness. The 2 of them continued on their journey towards Huyang Academy. The imperial city was extremely big. It was at least 10 times the size of Diyuan City, and after an hour, Ling Han and the others have finally arrived at the entrance to Huyang Academy. They were immediately halted in their advance. This was not a place that anyone could simply enter. I am Lu Yutong. Lu Yutong removed a silver plaque and handed it over to the 4 guards who were stationed at the entrance. So it is true disciple Lu. One of the guards closely examined the plaque, and quickly handed it back respectfully. We did not know it was you, so please forgive us, true disciple Lu. Lu Yutong waved off their apologies. She was currently veiled, so it was only logical that they did not recognize her. She pointed at Ling Han and said, This is my friend, and he needs to enter the academy for an important matter. Register him for me. Understood. The 4 guards nodded. Huyang Academy had very strict rules. Disciples of the academy were indeed allowed to bring visitors into the grounds of the academy, but the latter were not allowed to stay the night. Upon their entry, they would be registered, and if they had not exited the academy by night, then the disciple who had brought them in would be severely punished. After registering, Lu Yutong took Ling Han to a courtyard. This was where the teacher who was in charge of welcoming new disciples was stationed. Because the new year had just passed, there was a huge group of new students that would be coming to report here. After Lu Yutong had led Ling Han here, she then left with Ling Zixin. The little girl had come here with the place of enrollment that Ling Dongxing had gotten through his deal with the academy, and so would not need to go through the ordinary channels of registration. On the way here, Ling Han had heard about a lot of matters regarding the Huyang Academy from Liu Tong. Here, students were separated into 3 categories: ordinary disciples, true disciples, and core disciples. Ordinary disciples were simple enough. You'd be considered one from the moment you enter the academy. The true disciples were much less in number, only 30 in total. In terms of cultivation resources, they could gain 10 times the amount of resources available to ordinary disciples, so they were the object of envy for ordinary disciples. There were 2 conditions for becoming a true disciple. Firstly, you'd have to at least be in element gathering tier, and secondly, you'd have to be in the top 30 strongest disciples of the academy. As a result, competition was extremely fierce. However, Ling Han won the first place in this year's Yuan tournament, so he would be instantly recognized as a true disciple upon his entry, though this was only valid for 1 year. There were also the champions from 36 other cities who would be able to obtain such a reward, which meant that by the end of the year, 36 people would have to be disqualified, and after that, the true disciples that were ranked from the 21st place to the 30th place would have to face challenges from the 10 strongest ordinary disciples. If they lost, they'd be demoted back to being ordinary disciples. This was also why Qi Yongyi and Jin Wuji had returned to compete for the first place in the Yuan tournament. Because even as strong as they were still not true disciples. Chapter 91. Chapter 91. Entering the Academy. However, Lu Yutong was a true disciple. She was not as strong as Qi Yongyi, so why? Because she was the princess of the Lu clan. So, for one, the Academy definitely had to give some face to the Lu clan, and for another, at the tournament at the end of the year, she'd still be able to obtain a valuable treasure from her clan to drastically increase her battle prowess for a short time, thus allowing her to easily keep her position as a true disciple. Of course, each great clan could open this kind of back door only once, and guarantee the entry of only one of their clansmen into the Academy. All other clansmen could only depend on themselves to fight for their own place in this academy. Above true disciples, there were 3 core disciples. The core disciples were people the academy would put its full efforts into developing because they were the strongest among the younger generation of Rain Country. They represented the future level of martial arts of the whole of Rain Country, and were the face of the entire nation. To become a core disciple, the prowess of Gushing Spring Tier was necessary. A few hundred years ago, one of the strongest ever core disciples had even reached Spiritual Ocean Tier. However, upon reaching 30 years old, everyone would have to leave the academy, because 30 years old was considered as the age of maturity, and anyone above this age would be considered a full adult. One of the current core disciples was Qi Fengyun, the 3rd imperial prince of Rain Country. He was not only extremely talented, he was also someone that the imperial family of Rain Country as well as Huyang Academy had concentrated their efforts on developing, so naturally, he was extremely powerful. He was currently 27 years old, yet had already reached the 7th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was the strongest disciple of Huyang Academy, and was also nicknamed as the strongest son of heaven of Rain Country. The second person was Zhao Huan, who was a member of the Zhao clan, one of the 8 great clans. According to the rumors, when he was born, a strange phenomenon was witnessed. A golden light lit up half the imperial city, and he was almost killed by the secret powers of the imperial family, because he was considered a potential threat to the imperial throne that belonged to the Qi clan. Thankfully, the emperor was a wise man, and he not only did not do anything to harm Zhao Huan, he had even bestowed Zhao Huan with the title of Marquis of the Golden Skydo be granted nobility status upon birth. That was the first time this kind of event happened in the history of Rain Country. And Zhao Huan, after awakening his spirit base, indeed displayed a terrifying talent in the field of martial arts. Currently, Zhao Huan was 23 years old, and he was in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring Tier, so in truth, he was not inferior in any way to Qi Fengyun. The third person was called Qin Yi. He did not have a surname, and according to rumors, he was an orphan. He had been picked up the headmaster of the Huyang Academy from the street, and since he was a child, he had been missing his right arm. In the field of martial arts, losing the right arm was practically a sentence of death, and there would no longer be any future for this kind of person. Yet Qin Yi still managed to become a core disciple, proving how terrifying his natural talent was. Qin Yi, 22 years old, 3rd layer of Gushing Spring Tier. He was also rumored to have battle prowess that could soar up to 7 stars, and was someone that even Zhao Huan would have misgivings about going up against. Interesting. While Ling Han was waiting for the teacher who was responsible for receiving the new students, he kept thinking thus. He did not think too deeply about Qi Fengyun and Zhao Huan, but this Qin Yi did engender some of his intrigue. Could this Qin Yi also be a genius who possessed a heaven-grade spirit base? Otherwise, how could his advance up the ranks be so swift, and he himself so powerful. "Hey, are you a new student?" The teacher in charge of enrollment finally walked over. He looked at Ling Han a bit oddly, because he had never seen anyone coming to report carrying a little girl. "That's right." Ling Han drew out the proof showing that he had exited from the Yuan city and handed it over to the teacher. The teacher in charge of enrollment was an elite in the 5th layer of Gushing Spring tier, and definitely not someone to be underestimated. The teacher received it from him, took a look, and could not help showing a surprised expression. He blurted out, "You're Ling Han?" Ling Han scratched his head and asked, "Am I very well known?" "Ha ha ha, you, with the mere prowess of the 4th layer of Element Gathering tier, managed to defeat an opponent of the 9th layer of Element Gathering tier, and that opponent happened to be Qi Yongyi, whose battle prowess is not in any way weak. Such talent, TSK. The headmaster has already said to immediately bring you to see him when you're here to report," the teacher said. Suddenly he stared blankly and gasped in astonishment. You've already broken through to the 5th layer of Element Gathering tier." He was at first shocked, but then thought that Ling Han must have long since reached the peak period of the 4th layer of Element Gathering tier, and after so many days, this guy thus smoothly soared to the 5th layer of Element Gathering tier. When he thought about it this way, the shock level lessened by quite a large degree. If he found out that Ling Han had only been in the 2nd layer of body refining tier only a few months ago, his jaw would probably drop out of shock. However, because of his exclamation, Hunyo was instantly awakened. She was extremely displeased, and bared her teeth and growled at the teacher, displaying her ferocious nature. "Come, I'll take you to see the headmaster." The teacher beckoned his hand, waving Ling Han forward. Though Ling Han was still very weak now, with time, he may become the strongest core disciple of the academy, and show off the might of Rain Country. Ling Han nodded and followed the teacher out, stepping onto a pathway in the academy. Very quickly, they arrived at a cluster of buildings. This was where the high-level officials resided. However, that headmaster had not stayed in his own courtyard, so the teacher in charge of enrollment instructed him to wait for a moment, while he himself would go to seek out that headmaster who had gone who knows where. Ling Han waited for a moment, but felt a bit bored, and so began to stroll around in the surrounding area. And he suddenly picked up a very familiar smell, and he could not stop his feet from moving towards the source of that smell. It was a very elegant courtyard. The door of the courtyard was ajar, and had not been closed. Ling Han pushed open the door and entered, and very soon saw a young girl sitting cross-legged in the courtyard. Her hand was holding on to a very small alchemy furnace, and her whole right hand was erupting in flames. She was concocting a storm pill. Storm pill allowed a martial artist to increase his speed temporarily, like a storm blowing through. It was a very useful alchemical pill. However, there was something wrong with this smell. Ling Han wrinkled his nose and took a sniff. He instantly understood. One of the complementary drugs was wrong, and though this still allowed the storm pill to be successfully concocted, it would affect the success rate of forming the pill. It would also increase the chances of the furnace exploding. He spoke up. "I advise you to stop immediately. Otherwise, within the time of 3 breaths, your alchemy furnace would definitely explode." The girl completely ignored him. Now was the crucial time of concocting the storm pill, so how could she afford to be distracted? Merely by the second breath. Pa! The lid of the furnace was violently flung off, and some bits of junk sprayed out from within the furnace. Although she managed to dodge the majority of it, her face was still covered by a bit of it. The furnace had exploded. The girl finally raised her head to look at Ling Han, surprise filling her eyes. How had this guy known that the furnace would explode? You have to understand, with her level of control, there was absolutely no way that she would have been distracted by any external factors. The scarlet wolf bone is one of the most likely ingredients that would cause a furnace to explode. Especially if it is used in the concoction of storm pill, it would affect the quality of the completed pill. I really don't know what kind of idiot came up with this, Ling Han said, shaking his head. How dare you insult my master? The girl was suddenly enraged. With a flash, she had already leaped towards Ling Han. Her right hand formed a palm strike, flames winding around her hand as the heat caused the air around her hand to ripple. 7th layer of element gathering tear. Ling Han had known her cultivation level with a single look, and from the looks of this palm strike, she had not even reached the battle prowess of 7 stars. Actually, this was quite normal. Alchemists would concentrate all their energy on pill concoction and alchemy, so where would they have gotten any spare time to spend on refining their martial arts? This girl's cultivation level of 7th layer of element gathering tier had probably been reached with the aid of alchemical pills, so it was only logical that her actual battle prowess was quite weak. When she stood up, Ling Han had only at this moment realized to his surprise that this girl possessed a very tall, slender figure, and was about the same height as himself. Moreover, she had the charm of a deity, and was overwhelmingly beautiful, not the slightest bit inferior to Lu Yutong in terms of looks. Hee, have I spoken wrongly? Ling Han said as he dodged. Meanwhile, Hu Niu was crouching nearby, her face filled with excitement, wanting nothing more to pounce in and take a few bites of her own. Chapter 92. Chapter 92, The Real Storm Pill. The young girl gave a humph. She continued attacking but said, "The pill formula for this storm pill was a damaged, incomplete one. My master spent a considerable number of years and finally managed to complete the formula. Such a feat was an incredible contribution to the field of alchemy, and you dare to insult my master, so don't you think you deserve a beating?" The storm pill too was lost in the passage of time? Ling Han could not help frowning. What was going on here? Why had so many pill formulae from his time been lost? Reverse pill, storm pill. Dark moon grass actually being used to concoct purple origin pill, which was a spine-chillingly wasteful use of the dark moon grass. Logically, after 10,000 years, even if knowledge of alchemy had not improved much, it shouldn't have degraded to such a level, right? He struck fiercely with a palm, forcing the girl away from him. He said with a smile, "If that's true, then your master is indeed quite skilled. However, if I manage to concoct a better quality storm pill, then what are you going to do?" "Impossible! How can you surpass my master?" The girl did not believe him at all. "Just let me give it a try. Worst comes to worst, we'll continue our fight later," Ling Han said. "Fine," the girl agreed. Ling Han grabbed the alchemy furnace that had been dropped on the ground, and said, "Prepare the ingredients for me." He opened his mouth and in one breath recited a list of more than 20 different medicinal ingredients. If it was someone else, they would definitely not be able to remember all the ingredients. But since this young girl was an alchemist, she must definitely have a very powerful memory in this area. Very soon, she went into the room and returned with the ingredients Ling Han needed. Ling Han sat down on the ground. His right hand held onto the alchemy furnace. "Honk!" and flames instantly appeared upon his hand. The girl's beautiful face revealed a sliver of displeasure. After all, when an alchemist was in the midst of concocting alchemical pills, they all kept up a solemn demeanor, and would usually seat themselves cross-legged on the ground. This was a kind of formality. Yet Ling Han had just simply sat on the ground in such a relaxed fashion. This was absolutely inappropriate. But once she saw that Ling Han had begun the process of pill concoction, she could only force back the admonishment that had come to her mouth. To disturb another whilst he was in the midst of pill concoction was one of the greatest taboos for alchemists, so naturally she would not deliberately violate this rule. She was very much disdainful. One had to understand that although her master did not belong to the Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, his level of achievement in alchemy was absolutely authentic. He was a black grade high-level alchemist, and that was the same grade as the highest-ranked official of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion in Rain Country. Her master was currently the headmaster of the alchemy department in Huyang Academy. When there was mention of the name Wu Song Lin, what person would not respectfully address him as Grand Master? Even the imperial family of Rain Country had to give her master a modicum of respect. This brat actually dared to call her master an idiot. If this news was spread out, he'd definitely be beaten to death within 3 steps out of this courtyard. Once Ling Han began the process of pill concoction, his demeanor immediately changed. There was an air similar to the air of a great master circulating around him. His left hand moved very quickly, throwing medicinal ingredients into the furnace one after another. In the meantime, the furnace rotated continuously on his right hand. The flames were sometimes red, sometimes green, and sometimes white, transforming from one to the other color at a very rapid rate, seeming like a blur to any observer. The girl's disdainful expression had rapidly disappeared, and a shocked expression revealed itself on her face instead. Amateurs would only enjoy the show, while experts would enjoy the artfulness. Her name was Li Si-chan, and she herself was a genius of alchemy, which was why she had been taken as a disciple by Wu Songlin. She was a very conceited person, but when she compared herself to Ling Han, she had to admit that Ling Han's movements were much more experienced and mature than her own. His movements were very natural and relaxed, as if he had been immersed in this field for a few hundred years and had reached a level where he could easily concoct pills even with his eyes closed. Such an achievement, let alone her, even her master was far inferior. How could this be? How could this be? Shouldn't this guy be a profligate young master? How was it that he had such frightening ability in the field of alchemy? Within mere moments, the medicinal ingredients in front of Ling Han had all disappeared, and some sweat had appeared on his forehead. Storm Pill was a yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pill, after all. Furthermore, it was one of the more difficult to concoct types. He was able to concoct it now, but because his cultivation level was a bit too weak, it exerted much of his energy to do so. My good disciple, have you finally concocted the storm pill? At this moment, a voice filled with surprise was heard from the doorway. A small, short old man walked in, all smiles and with a food container held in his hands. There was another old man behind him. The two of them walked in together, and if one paid careful attention, they would be able to discover that there were 3 silver badges hanging on the chests of these two men. Black-grade high-level alchemists. In the whole of Rain Country, there were only 2 black-grade high-level alchemists. One of them was the Pavilion Master of Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, Fu Yuanxing, whereas the other was the headmaster of the alchemy department of Huyang Academy, Wu Songlin. And they were these 2 men. Wu Songling saw the girl was standing at one side, and his face was instantly filled with surprise. He had never thought that the person who was in the middle of concocting the pill was not his disciple. Fu Yuanxing also revealed a shocked expression. He knew that Wu Songlin had obtained a very good disciple who had managed to become a yellow-grade mid-level alchemist at the mere age of 18. Moreover, the storm pill was one of the more difficult to concoct pills among yellow-grade mid-level alchemical pills, and now it was actually being concocted by another youngster. Naturally, this was enough to surprise him. It can't be that this old man Wu has gotten another genius of alchemy as a disciple, right? Damn it, why were all the talented people snatched away by him? Hu Niu had initially been extremely bored. She had lain down on the ground and had been sleeping, but after Wu Songlin entered, her nose immediately wrinkled, and she bounced up into a crouch. Her eyes fixed upon the food container in his hands, and suddenly, with a low growl, she scuttled forward and pounced towards the food container. Ling Han's right hand rotated continuously. There actually appeared 3 different kinds of flames from between his 5 fingers at the same time, red, green, and white, which suddenly extinguished. 3 fire guide. He had invented this in his last life, and this discovery brought upon a revolution in the field of alchemy. It not only would increase the quality of the completed pill, it could even recover a dead pill that could cause the alchemy furnace to explode. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanxing were both flabbergasted. Their eyes were so wide that they were in danger of popping out of their skulls, and their mouths were wide open in shock. From the looks of it, they were extremely astonished and shocked. Meanwhile, Hu Niu took advantage of their distraction and snatched Wu Songlin's food container away. She immediately opened it up, and began to enjoy the delicious contents. Could this be the legendary long-lost 3 fire guide? To be able to produce 3 different flames at different temperatures, which would improve the effects of the completed pill drastically. It can even recover dead pills. This is the legend of legends, and I've always thought this was only a myth. It should not be the real one, probably just an imitation," the two old men said, filled with astonishment. "Who?" Ling Han exhaled. He tossed the alchemy furnace to Li Si-chan, and said, "Fortunately, I've not disappointed your expectations. Take a look." Shwa! The two old men simultaneously snatched at the furnace, as if they were two kids fighting over a toy. They were both powerful warriors of spiritual pedestal tier, so their actions were as fast as lightning, and only appeared to be a blur to observers. Li Si-chan was dumbstruck. These two were the most respected and revered alchemists in the whole of Rain Country, and now they were actually behaving like two kids. How could she believe what her own eyes were telling her? Finally, the two old men desisted at the same time. One of them held on to the furnace, while the other lifted the furnace lid and very carefully drew out a scarlet pill from within. "This color, this aroma! There's no mistake, this is the real storm pill!" Wu Songlin carved off a small slice, placed it into his mouth, and tasted it. He could not help the increasing degree of surprise and shock on his face, and said, "This is definitely the real storm pill, and moreover, its effects have reached 12 stars, no, 13 stars. What?" Fu Yuanxing instantly leaped up in shock. Chapter 93. Chapter 93, Convinced. In the field of alchemy, if the quality of a completed pill reached the standard requirements, it would be graded as 10 stars. If the quality exceeded normal standards, it would be graded as 11 or 12 stars. Normally, the quality would not exceed 12 stars. If the quality of the completed pill was below normal standards, it would be given a grade from 1 to 9 stars, and any pill with less than 1 star would be considered as junk, absolutely unusable. Hiss, even if I were concocting low-grade alchemical pills, my best record was only 12 stars. Fu Yuanxing exclaimed in shock. Li Si-chan's face was filled with absolute disbelief. She could already be considered a genius of alchemy herself, or she would not have been taken in by Wu Songlin as his personally taught disciple. Yet the majority of the completed pills that she has managed to concoct would be 10 stars, barely acceptable. A small portion of her completed pills would be 9 stars or 11 stars. Moreover, the storm pill could be considered to be one of the hardest to concoct pills among yellow-grade mid-level pills. Just take her as an example. She had already practiced concocting the storm pill for a month, yet every time, her efforts would only result in the furnace exploding. You can see how high the difficulty level of concocting this pill was. Such a pill, as long as it was completed, it would be considered a success. Even if it was only graded 3 or 4 stars, this kind of pill would still have a large market of customers willing to buy it. 13 stars. That was the kind of pill over which people would go to war. This guy really had not been bragging. He had really concocted the storm pill, and the quality of the completed pill was even higher than Wu Songlin's own. The storm pills that Wu Songlin himself concocted were only graded at 8 stars, or his record best, 9 stars. Could it be that her master had really made a mistake? "Young man! Young man!" Wu Songlin's eyes were bright and shining. This expression had a close degree of similarity with Hun Yo. In an instant he had scuttled over to Ling Han, held onto his hand and said, "Were you using the 3-fire guide earlier?" "And?" Ling Han nodded. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanxing both sucked in a breath of cold air. This was something that had been considered a myth among myths. What did a young man that knew how to use the 3-fire guide signify? "Young man, accept me as your master, and I can guarantee you will become an earth-grade alchemist at the very least," Wu Songlin said immediately. Hearing these words from him, Fu Yuanxing instantly understood that Ling Han had no relations to Wu Songlin. He quickly squeezed himself into the fray and said, "No, no, no, take me as your master. I am the pavilion master of Rain Country's Heaven's Medicine Pavilion, and I've got uncountable resources in my hands. You can concoct any pill you like." "Nonsense! Old man Fu, you have to understand, this is the territory of my Huyang Academy. Are you trying to snatch my disciples away from me?" Wu Songlin was instantly enraged. This young man was obviously a genius of alchemy that could never be encountered within 1,000 years. Just take a look at that storm pill, and you'll know that's 13 stars. This was practically without precedent. What do you mean by snatching your disciples away from you? You don't even know the name of this young man, and you dare to say he's your disciple? Fu Yuanxing snorted. He turned back round, all smiles again. Young man, what's your name? Li Xichan was completely struck dumb with shock. These two men were the best alchemists in the whole of Rain Country. Whichever one of them announced they intended to accept disciples, it was absolutely guaranteed that there would be a queue of people all the way from the east gate to the west gate of the imperial city. But now, these two men were actually fighting with each other over who gets to accept Ling Han as a disciple, and were even about to come to blows over the matter. How could this not astonish her? Moreover, she was even a little jealous. I am Ling Han, Ling Han said. I am one of the new students that is entering Huyang Academy this year. Did you hear that? This is a disciple of my department. Wu Songlin said proudly, and waved his hand a few times at Fu Yuanxing. I don't have the time to share a drink with you today, so you'd best hurry back to your Heaven's Medicine Pavilion. So what if he's a student of your Huyang Academy? That doesn't conflict with him accepting me as his master. Fu Yuanxing was completely indifferent, and continued to say to Ling Han, Young man, what do you say? This is my disciple, old man Fu, are you going to fight with me over him? Wu Songlin said in a thunderous rage. For such a disciple, I'm definitely willing to fight. Fu Yuanxing said, not to be outdone. You're going to ignore our friendship of so many years? Pei, you're the one who's so insistent on fighting with me. Neither of the two old men was intending to back down, and from the looks of it, they were moments away from fighting with each other. Master, the both of you can accept him as your joint disciple. Li Xichan interrupted. That's right. The two old men paused at the same time. Why hadn't they thought of such a simple solution? The two of them turned to look at Ling Han. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, I think that the both of you might not be able to teach me anything. What arrogance! Li Xichan's small mouth was wide open in shock. Who were Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanxing? They were the two strongest alchemists in Rain Country. And they couldn't teach him anything? Even though you've managed to concoct a storm pill worth 13 stars, the storm pill is only a yellow-grade mid-level pill after all. Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanxing both looked displeased. This young man was a genius, but he was really too arrogant. Such a person may possibly shine for a moment, but definitely would not achieve too much. Ling Han smiled and said, The two of you, we can discuss our theories with each other, and learn from one another. Saying such words was really him being extremely modest and humble. As someone who had once been the alchemy emperor, putting aside that these two men were only black-grade high-level alchemists, even earth-grade high-level alchemists were only qualified to stand quietly and listen respectfully to his words in front of him. Yet Wu Songlin and Fu Yuanxing did not know that, so the displeasure on their faces deepened even further. Ling Han pretended he had not seen anything, and casually began to speak. Most of what he said was only common knowledge of alchemy. Though his cultivation level had decreased by much, and there was no way he was able to concoct high-grade alchemical pills, but if you were talking about theoretical knowledge, who would be able to match him? The two alchemists had been initially indifferent, but then they gradually became serious. Occasionally, they would offer their own opinions, but as the discussion continued, they had transformed into the learning side, and continued to ask Ling Han about some difficult problems they had encountered in alchemy. Li Xichan watched all this happen from the side. She had long been shocked to numbness. This young man was obviously even younger than herself, yet how was it that he had such shocking understanding and comprehension in the field of alchemy? If one did not see his appearance, and did not hear his voice, anyone would think that this was an elderly alchemist. She too possessed a terrifying talent in the field of alchemy, which was why she had been accepted by Wu Songlin as his personal disciple. Moreover, she was also extremely beautiful, and together with Liu Yutong, The both of them were called the twin pearls of the imperial city. The number of people who were interested in pursuing and wooing her would be enough to form a queue that could encircle the imperial city. But when you compared the two of them, she was practically like an alchemist's apprentice that had not even yet been formally taught. As she listened, the admiration she felt for Ling Han grew even stronger. She could not help sighing. There were indeed geniuses in this world. If that was not true, how was it possible that someone at such a young age had already surpassed her master? Indeed, there is no age restriction for learning. Whoever has the ability deserves to be called a teacher. Fu Yuanxing was the first to exhale. I had initially thought that young friend was too arrogant and proud, yet never thought that the one who was too arrogant and proud was myself. Young friend's level of comprehension in alchemy has already far surpassed the both of us, and in future, you'd definitely be able to become an earth-grade alchemist, or even a heaven-grade alchemist. After I've heard these words from you, I feel as if the grand door to earth-grade alchemy has opened for me, and once I manage to fully comprehend your views, I'd definitely be able to advance into the ranks of earth-grade. Wu Songlin sighed as well. He stood, bowed for a long while to Ling Han, and said, "Many thanks, young friend. Many thanks, young friend." Fu Yuanxing had also stood, and bowed towards Ling Han. Li Xichan was completely numb with shock. Because of the unique status accorded to alchemists, these two men could be considered as possessing the highest status, and were only below the emperor in rank. Yet now, they actually both bowed to a youngster. This was a special treatment that not even the emperor of Rain Country could enjoy. If this news spread out, probably no one would believe it, right? Chapter 94. Chapter 94, Fighting to Take In. Ling Han accepted their bows of respect without an ounce of guilt. Previously, he had indeed been teaching these two men. With these teachings from him, it was very likely that these two men had gained a chance to advance to each become an earth-grade alchemist. Otherwise, they couldn't even dream of achieving such heights within this lifetime. He could be considered as half the master of these two men. As a result, it was only right for him to receive a bow of respect from these two men. If young Master Han has any problems in future, please do come to Heaven's Medicine Pavilion to seek me out, Fu Yuanxing said solemnly. He did not dare to address Ling Han as young friend any longer. Wu Songlin did not say anything along these lines. After all, Ling Han was a disciple of Huyang Academy, so he could see Ling Han at any time that he liked. He would of course not allow Ling Han to suffer any grievances in his territory. Ling Han smiled softly. He was not the type of person to selflessly offer gifts. The reason why he had taught these two men was because of their high status, and thus, he would have gained two powerful supporters in the imperial city, so he would have fewer qualms when doing certain things in this city. Fu Yuanxing excused himself and departed. A lot of the difficult problems in the field of alchemy that had been troubling him had been solved, so he needed to immediately return to digest this new knowledge and completely transform it into his own understanding and comprehension. "Old man Wu, return my disciple quickly!" It was at this very moment that an old man barged in, while the teacher in charge of enrollment followed behind. Needless to say, this was one of the headmasters of Huyang Academy, Lian Guangzhu. "What's your disciple?" Wu Songlin immediately glared at this intruder. "This is obviously a disciple of our alchemy department. When did he become a disciple of your martial arts department?" Huyang Academy was actually divided into two departments, the martial arts department and alchemy department. However, because there were indeed too few alchemists, when people talked about the Huyang Academy, they were actually referring to the martial arts department. In Wu Songlin's opinion, Ling Han's level of comprehension and understanding of alchemy was at quite scary heights, and his theoretical knowledge of the field was even deeper than his own. Then, naturally, he should be enrolled into the alchemy department, and concentrate his efforts on concocting alchemical pills, advancing step by step to the top of the field. Nonsense, this brat's battle prowess is outstanding, so of course he belongs to our martial department. And you actually plan to have him learn how to concoct alchemical pills. This is practically leading him astray. Lian Guangzhu was furious. He took great strides and was soon in front of Wu Songlin, pointing a finger at the latter while being so close that his finger was almost at the tip of Wu Songlin's nose. "You're the one talking nonsense. This brat's understanding of alchemy is so high that there has practically been no precedent. To have him practice martial arts is the greatest waste of talent." Wu Songlin, not to be outdone, also pointed a finger at Lian Guangzu's face. "Old man Wu, I'm warning you, don't point your finger at my face," Lian Guangzu threatened. "You were the one who pointed your finger at me first." Wu Songlin humphed. "Withdraw your finger first." "Pei, you take it back first." "You first." If you added the age of each of these two old men, it would exceed 150 years old. These two old men completely looked like two stubborn bulls, glaring so intensely at each other that their eyeballs seemed to be in danger of popping out from their eye sockets. Li Si-chan could not stop herself from pressing a hand to her forehead. Lian Guangzu and Wu Songlin had actually been friends for many years, yet these two old men had always been way too prone to arguing with each other. They'd be shouting and pointing their fingers at each other for each small issue, as if they were two mortal enemies. As for the teacher in charge of enrollment, he was completely dumbstruck by this scene. He knew that Ling Han was exceptionally talented, with outstanding battle prowess for someone his age. But to actually cause these two headmasters to almost come to blows just to have him enroll in their own department, this was something that he had never imagined would happen. Wouldn't this brat be able to do as he liked in Huyang Academy in the future? No, with these two headmasters watching over him, he'd even be able to do as he liked in the whole imperial city. You have to understand, these two men were not only powerful warriors of spiritual pedestal tier, they were also the headmasters of the academy, and have taught uncountable numbers of elites, so their status was incomparably revered. Moreover, Wu Songlin also had the additional status of a black-grade high-level alchemist, so even the Emperor of Rain Country had to address him respectfully as Grand Master when they met. The teacher in charge of enrollment could not help becoming so envious that his eyes had turned red. "Fine, I will not lower myself to your level, but this brat is a disciple of my martial arts department, so I'm going to take him back." Lian Guangzu grabbed hold of Ling Han's shoulder. "Nonsense, this is the future star of my alchemy department, and he is going to be the hope of the entire field of alchemy. How could I allow you to waste his talent like that?" Wu Songlin quickly held on to Ling Han's other shoulder. "Let go! You let go!" The two old men each tugged at one shoulder, both intending to pull Ling Han to their side. However, they did not dare to put too much strength into it so as to avoid directly tearing Ling Han into halves. They could only glare furiously at each other and gasp continuously in exertion. These two men were extraordinarily outstanding individuals that could cause the entire Rain Country to tremble with a few stomps of their feet, and now they were actually about to come to blows as they fought over a young man. Who would believe that such a thing could be possible? Li Si-chan was flushing in embarrassment. These two old men really did not act their own age. They were so old already, and yet they still liked to bicker with each other like two little kids. Meanwhile, Hunyo gave a loud burp. She had really enjoyed her meal. "Young Master Han, just say the word. Are you going to learn martial arts from this old man, or enter our alchemy department, and join us in researching alchemy?" Wu Songlin asked. He did not want to have this genius of alchemy take a misstep in life. "Don't be afraid of this old man, just tell him the truth. Don't you want to learn martial arts?" Lian Guangzu hurriedly said. Due to his agitated state, he had not noticed that Wu Songlin had used the respectful address of Young Master Han. "Young Master Han, if you agree to enroll in the alchemy department, I will immediately give you 1,000 academic points." Wu Songlin gave him a very sincere offer in exchange for his agreement. "What?" Li Si-chan and the teacher in charge of enrollment were both dumbstruck with shock. 1,000 academic points. Within the Huyang Academy, academic points could be exchanged for a multitude of various items, cultivation techniques, martial arts techniques, alchemical pills, as well as various natural treasures. But it was very difficult to obtain academic points. Even a genius like Liu Yutong may not have accumulated 1,000 points altogether throughout the years she spent in the academy. Hey, old man Wu, you can't just simply give out academic points any which way you like. Rewarding with academic points is very strictly regulated, and you're not exempted from the rules. Lian Guangzhu hurriedly spoke. Hey, do you think I'm that kind of man? Wu Songlin said proudly. Young Master Han has just completed the recovery of the storm pill. Does such a beneficial contribution not deserve a mere 1,000 academic points? What? Lian Guangzhu gasped quickly. Hadn't you recovered the storm pill a long time ago? The pill formula I recovered could only produce a pill of 8 stars, yet the pill that this young friend had just concocted managed to reach 13 stars. Wu Songlin said extremely proudly, as if he was the one who had accomplished such a magnificent feat. Lian Guangzhu could not help but begin to feel as if he should concede, but then he immediately recalled Ling Han's extraordinary talent in martial arts, reaching the 5th layer of element gathering tier at the young age of 17. Moreover, at the mere level of the 4th layer of element gathering tier, he managed to defeat Qi Yongyi. Such a talented genius of martial arts, what was he going to learn if not martial arts? But the problem was, Ling Han had not yet made any significant contribution in the name of the martial arts department, so he could not really afford to reward Ling Han with any academic points. The old man began to sweat uncontrollably due to his anxiety. At this moment, Ling Han finally spoke. I'll just learn from both departments. He was the alchemy emperor, so if he casually offered some long-lost ancient pill formulae, he'd be able to get a huge pile of academic points. He would of course not surrender such an easy and attractive opportunity. Moreover, he did not intend to resume his old path of alchemy, and would be concentrating the majority of his efforts on the path of martial arts. The two old men looked at him doubtfully. After all, whether it was the field of martial arts or the field of alchemy, both were wide-ranging and profound fields of knowledge. Even if one spent his whole lifetime, it was practically impossible for him to reach the top of the field, what more to simultaneously practice in both fields. I'm a genius, so there won't be any problems, Ling Han said confidently. Li Xichan had half opened her mouth in shock. She was astonished by the level of shamelessness Ling Han could go to. How could someone praise himself to such an extent? But then she recalled Ling Han's previous performance. Even two black-grade high-level alchemists ignored their pride to seek his teachings. There indeed does not seem to be much problems with regards to the field of alchemy. There really won't be any problems? The two old men asked in unison. Definitely no problem, Ling Han said with a smile. Chapter 95. Chapter 95, Looking for a Teacher. All right then. The two old men nodded at the same time. They had been friends for many years after all. While they had previously argued quite vigorously, either wanted to damage the harmony between them, so this was an appropriate solution to the problem. Here, this is the plaque for my alchemy department. Just hold on to this, and you'd be able to freely enter the alchemy department. Wu Songlin handed an iron plaque over to Ling Han. Old man Wu, this brat just arrived to the academy to report today, so I'm going to take him to the martial arts department to register first, then make arrangements for his accommodation, Lian Guangzhu said, tugging on Ling Han, and left quickly. Lian Guangzhu dragged Ling Han off for a very considerable distance before finally stopping, when he asked the teacher in charge of enrollment, "Why had you let this brat run off to old man Wu's?" The teacher felt very wronged. How could he have known that Ling Han loved to run around so much? He had just barely been gone for a while, and when he returned, Ling Han had disappeared. Yet he dared not argue with the headmaster, and could only lower his head humbly and admit his fault. Thankfully, Lian Guangzhu only wanted to vent some of his displeasure, and was not really blaming him. Good brat, he had defeated Qi Yongyi at the mere level of 4th layer of element gathering tier. He should have about 12 battle stars, a whole 8 stars more than what he should have at his current cultivation level. Not even that brat, Qin Yi, would be able to match this kind of talent, Lian Guangzhu murmured, his eyes bright. Such a genius of martial arts, How could he waste his time on concocting alchemical pills? If these words were heard by Wu Songlin, based on his understanding of Lian Guangzhu, he'd definitely be able to guess that the latter had come up with a wicked idea. You arrange for him to stay in a more remote location. Also, arrange for him to be taught by a teacher that has no disciples. You must not let old man Wu find him. He was indeed two-faced. The teacher in charge of enrollment could not help sweating, and nodded hesitatingly. This was the headmaster, so he definitely had to obey his words. But Wu Songlin was also the headmaster of the alchemy department, plus he was also a black-grade high-level alchemist. In Rain Country, his status was more or less right below the Emperor of Rain Country. If Wu Songlin really intended to rebuke him, would he be able to withstand the consequences? Lian Guangzhu of course understood the possible consequences, and so he said, "After you're done with this, take a vacation for half a year. You will still be paid your monthly salary during your vacation." The teacher in charge of enrollment heard this, and was instantly delighted. This not only allowed him to lie low until Wu Songlin calmed down, he could even be paid without working at all. This was naturally the best option for him. Which teacher would be the best? After Lian Guangzhu had left, the teacher in charge of enrollment thought furiously. I've got it. He smiled. Old M.O. Old M.O.? Ling Han was carrying Hunyo with one arm, while his other hand was holding onto a light bundle that only contained a few changes of clothing. The teacher in charge of enrollment said, Old Mo's real name is M.O. Gao. He also used to be a genius of our martial arts department, but later on, it was as if he had been possessed. He actually proclaimed that he wanted to create the ultimate sword arts technique in this world. The result was that his cultivation level stagnated and he did not advance any further. If it was not for the fact that the headmaster sympathized with his talent and took him in as a teacher at the academy. AI. But in any case, the headmaster intends to teach you personally, so you do not have to concern yourself with old Mo's cultivation level. Ling Han was led by the teacher to an extremely remote location. There were only a bare few courtyards here, and they were all in shambles. The wild grass by the side of the pathway had already reached the height of his waist, so it was likely that no one had lived here for a very long time. Pun, pun, pun! The teacher stepped forward to knock on the door. After quite some time, a voice finally came from within, and said, Who is it? Old M.O., it's me, the teacher said. From the looks of it, the two of them were quite familiar with each other. The door opened, and out walked a medium-sized man. He should have been less than 40 years old, but his whole face was covered with a beard and he looked extremely disheveled as he had not trimmed it in any way, it simply grew as it liked. Thus, appearance-wise, he appeared like a man who was in his 60s or 70s. What is it? If there's nothing important, I have to go practice my sword techniques, the man said. He was obviously M.O. Gao. I'm here to deliver a student to you. The teacher pointed at Ling Han and said, His name is Ling Han. All right, I've delivered him successfully to you, so I'll take my leave. It was as if a fire had been lit under his behind. He immediately ran off, terrified that he would encounter Wu Songlin. In that case, he'd really be trapped between a rock and a hard place. Ling Han stared at M.O. Gao, and M.O. Gao also stared back at Ling Han. For a moment, neither of them opened their mouths to speak. After a while, M.O. Gao finally nodded and said, Since I'm a teacher here, I can't really decline an assignment given to me by the academy. In the future, you can just follow me to practice sword techniques. All right. Ling Han was indifferent. The few courtyards nearby are all empty. Just pick any which one to stay in. M.O. Gao turned back round and returned to where he had come from. I'll just leave this door open, and you can come in whenever you like. But it is strictly forbidden to disturb me when I'm practicing my sword techniques. Ling Han shrugged, and together with Hunyo, went off in search of an appropriate place of accommodation. The courtyards here were all in shambles, with dust coating every surface. He chose a slightly better courtyard, and began a cleaning campaign. The courtyard had to be habitable, right? Hunyo too tried to give a hand, but naturally, she was more of a hindrance than of help. With a flop, bits of dust flew all around in the air and her small face was transformed into the face of a little floret cat, causing Ling Han to laugh loudly in spite of himself. After busying themselves for over half a day, they had at least managed to completely tidy up a single room. Ling Han did not go immediately to seek out Liu Yutong, and trusted that she would take good care of Ling Zixian. "Anyone here?" A voice was heard from the doorway. Ling Han walked over to take a look, and there stood a young boy in his teens, who was pushing a small cart. There was a sack of rice, some meat, and vegetables on the cart. "Meat! Meat! Meat!" Hunyo's eyes had immediately lit up. She took a leap and pounced over, scaring the young boy so much that he had fallen onto his behind on the ground. He was here to deliver the food rations. It looked like Ling Han would be preparing his own meals in the future. Ling Han smiled, walked over and pulled the young boy up. He asked, "How many days is this food for?" 10 days, the young boy said. "After 10 days, I'll come back to deliver some more food." Ling Han shook his head and said, "This is not enough. There's only enough here for a single day." 1 day? The young boy was shocked, and his eyes swept over Ling Han in doubt. No matter how it was, he really could not see how it was possible that Ling Han would have such a huge appetite. "Never mind, just deliver the food here. Money's no issue," Ling Han said, smiling. "The Academy does not have any regulations on the daily amount of food, but are you guys sure you can finish eating so much?" The young boy was in disbelief. Ling Han did not bother to explain himself. In truth, the one with such a huge appetite was not himself, but Hunyo. The young boy unloaded the food from the cart, and pushing the cart, he departed. Hunyo immediately started to jump around Ling Han, looking very impatient. "Don't rush, it's not even night yet," Ling Han said with a laugh. Hunyo was instantly displeased and pouted, baring her teeth at Ling Han. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "I won't be cooking today. We'll go and walk around the city. We'll have to buy new blankets and other essentials, as well as prepare a few more changes of clothing. After we're done shopping, we can go eat. Meat! 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 Meat!" Hearing the word eat, the little girl immediately began to jump around again, her earlier displeasure completely gone. Ling Han brought the little girl and went out. He had already applied for permission from Lian Guangzhu so that the girl could stay with him here. Otherwise, if she had to stay outside the academy grounds, Ling Han really had no idea who would be capable of caring for her. He held onto Hunyo's hand and walked to allow the girl to get used to walking with 2 legs, and not keep thinking about walking around on all 4s. Come see, Zhu Wujiu is challenging Nan Gongji." They hadn't even left the grounds of the academy before hearing this announcement from a student who appeared to be extremely excited. Chapter 96. Chapter 96, Silver Moon Race. Ling Han could not help feeling moved and followed at the heels of the advancing crowd. There were more and more people joining the crowd, and as they discussed the details about the battle between Zhu Wujiu and Nan Gongji, Ling Han very quickly came to understand the background of these 2 young men. Zhu Wujiu and Nan Gongji were both ordinary disciples of Huyang Academy, but Nan Gongji was ranked in the top 10 strongest ordinary disciples, and was an elite martial artist that was qualified enough to issue a challenge to the true disciples in a bid to join their ranks. Zhu Wujiu was slightly inferior to him, but ability-wise, he was definitely ranked within the top 20 ordinary disciples, so he was really not that bad. Why is Zhu Wujiu still so dead set on fighting with Nan Gongji? There's nothing to be done about it. Who asked elder brother disciple Nagong to sacrifice elder sister disciple Han Wan to save his own life during their previous practical training trip? You've got to understand, elder sister disciple Han Wan was Zhu Wujiu's lover, so how could he not go crazy? I heard that elder sister disciple Han Wan actually died because of elder brother disciple Nangong. She had been injured by his sword, and that was why she had fallen behind and was forced into a life-and-death battle with the silvery light beast. That's how elder brother disciple Nangong managed to buy the time to flee with his life. Sure, how could you so openly speak of such things? Be careful that Nangongji won't make trouble for you later. He's the 5th young master of the Nangong clan, and his 3rd elder brother, Nangong Xing, is even a true disciple with the cultivation level of the 3rd layer of Gushing Spring tier. But Zhu Wujiu is indeed faithful. He obviously knows that the Nangong clan is not to be trifled with, yet he would still challenge Nangongji to a duel every year. Just last year, he was so heavily injured that he had almost lost his life. Never thought that he'd issue a challenge again this year. It's a pity that Zhu Wujiu is really not that talented. He only has an Earth-grade low-level spirit base and he comes from a poor family, so he can't obtain any additional resources for his development. The gap between him and Nangongji would only become wider and wider. When Ling Han heard the people around him discussing the history between Zhu Wujiu and Nangongji, he could not help but feel slightly curious about this Zhu Wujiu. The crowd soon arrived at the martial training court of the academy, and they could see there was someone standing within, so the others very naturally did not step into the court. Sparring was an allowed practice of Huyang Academy, and as long as both sides of the battle agreed, they'd be able to carry out their battle in the martial training court. The doctrine was to be as merciful as possible, but even if the fighters did not manage to restrain themselves in time, they wouldn't be punished too harshly. After all, weapons were blind. However, if anyone dared to deliberately injure their opponent, the academy would hand out a very severe punishment. For example, if one of the fighters had already admitted defeat or fallen unconscious or had otherwise completely lost the ability to defend themselves yet their opponent continued to attack them, this would be considered a breach of the rules that'd be met with a severe punishment. Ling Han looked at the man that was standing in the martial training court. He seemed to be about 25 or 26 years old. He was a tall man who bore a long sword on his back. He could not really be considered handsome, but his gaze was very intimidating. Usually, others probably dared not look him directly in the eye. Why isn't Nangongji here yet? He's the one being challenged, so of course he has to put on some appropriate airs. I say, how many times has Zhu Wujiu challenged Nangongji already? This should be the 5th time, right? That means that 4 years have passed. This guy's perseverance is really a scary thing. With each battle, he would be severely injured and close to death, yet he would still grit his teeth and survive regardless, making others can't help but admire his determination. While waiting, the crowd continued to talk among themselves. They were all expressing sympathy and admiration for Zhu Wujiu. The corners of Ling Han's lips turned up slightly into a grin as he thought, I never thought that I'd be able to encounter someone with a special constitution. His body is surrounded by ripples of faint silvery light, plus the others said that he did not die even after receiving a critical injury 4 times. Instead, he very quickly recovered. This person must be a member of the Silver Moon race. The Silver Moon race was born with the Silver Moon Constitution. This was a constitution that had powerful abilities of recovery, and their bodies themselves could be considered a divine healing pill. As a result, the numbers of this race were pitifully low. They had been hunted down and killed by others, concocted into alchemical pills. I had originally thought that after 10,000 years had passed, this race would have gone extinct. I never thought that I'd be able to encounter one of its members today. Fine, for the sake of the Silver Moon King, I'll give him a helping hand. 10,000 years ago, Ling Han entered the territory of the Silver Moon race to collect some medicinal ingredients. He was very cordially received by the leader of the Silver Moon race of the time, the Silver Moon King. Unfortunately, not long after that, the Silver Moon race was wiped out. Ling Han's cultivation level at that time was still too low, so there was nothing he could do to help. Later on, when he had joined the ranks of Heaven-tier cultivators, the culprits responsible for the obliteration of the Silver Moon race had all died of old age. This was one of Ling Han's regrets. Ha ha ha, Zhu Wujiu, how many times must you fail before you understand that you will never be a match for me? Meanwhile, a young man strode into the martial training court, a powerful aura emanating from his person. 9th layer of element gathering tier, and he was at the peak period. If he did not have such ability, How else could he have managed to secure his place among the top 10 strongest ordinary disciples? Compared to him, Zhu Wujiu was very much inferior, with a cultivation level of only the 7th layer of element gathering tier. Yet everyone knew that cultivation level did not represent one's battle prowess. Since Zhu Wujiu was able to rank among the top 20, it could be seen that his actual battle prowess far surpassed his own cultivation level. Speak less nonsense, make your move! Zhu Wujiu immediately drew out his sword and made a gesture with it. Nangongji's face was filled with arrogance. He too made a gesture, and this signified that both fighters had agreed to begin this battle. Xiu! Zhu Wujiu rushed forwards, and as his sword swept in an arch, cold light danced about. Nangongji was completely indifferent to this. He was an elite in the top 10, and compared to him, what could a mere Zhu Wujiu count as? Ding 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 ding! The two fighters were quickly embroiled in a fierce exchange of blows. Nangongji was very obviously having the upper hand in this battle. He looked very relaxed, and even managed to mock and ridicule his opponent as the battle went on to attack Zhu Wujiu's morale. However, in truth, in his heart concealed a deep dread towards Zhu Wujiu. In the previous 4 battles he had acted to kill Zhu Wujiu. Though the latter would not die immediately, if the injury dragged on for another 2 or 3 days, he'd definitely die. And based on Zhu Wujiu's family background, there was no way he'd be able to afford high-grade healing pills to heal his injuries. Yet this guy not only did not die, he recovered from his wounds without any kind of aftereffects. After such miraculous recovery occurred 4 times, of course Nangongji would feel dread. He knew his own guilt, and Zhu Wujiu was the only person that had relations with Han Wan, so as long as Zhu Wujiu was still alive, he would continue to be uneasy. This may lead to the day of his breakthrough to gushing spring tear coming so slowly it would seem like forever. As a result, he intended to be absolutely merciless today. He definitely had to kill Zhu Wujiu right on the spot today. Defeating and killing were 2 completely different issues. The difficulty level was completely different. Thus, if he wanted to kill Zhu Wujiu, then he needed to create an opportunity wherein he could kill Zhu Wujiu in a single strike. After the battle, he'd be able to shift the blame away from himself by saying he had not managed to restrain himself in time. The 2 fighters continued to battle for a while, and Nangongji, with his much more superior ability, finally found an excellent opportunity. He stabbed with his sword, creating 3 flashes of cold light which headed directly for Zhu Wujiu's heart. This was not sword chi. He had just stabbed so quickly that he had created 2 afterimages. Earth-grade high-level martial arts technique, shadow dance sword arts. He spent all the academic points that he had saved up for this martial arts technique, just to prepare for today so that he could kill Zhu Wujiu. Die! He spat out in his mind as he used the strongest move of the shadow dance sword arts to form a merciless attack. Xiu! Zhu Wujiu brandished his sword as well, and actually formed 2 flashes of cold light. Could it be that he was also using an extremely swift sword technique? No! Sword chi! The spectators all gasped in shock. This was sword chi, proof of a ruler. Pooh! Pooh! 2 spurts of blood appeared at the same time. Nangongji's sword had pierced Zhu Wujiu's stomach, while the sword chi that Zhu Wujiu had formed had drawn across Nangongji's throat, leaving behind a bloody wound. A cold light appeared in Nangongji's eyes. He immediately drew back his sword and gave another stab. He wanted to kill his opponent. Shwa! Another flash of cold light drew over and an arch Linghan acted, stepping forward with a wave of his sword. Chapter 97. Chapter 97, Imparting. With a ding, Nangongji was forced back by this strike. He glared furiously at Linghan, and said, "Who are you to dare to meddle in my affairs? Don't you know that interfering in a battle is a very serious offense?" Linghan smiled softly and said, "He can no longer continue the battle, so this battle is already over. However, if you would like to have a spar with me, I don't mind teaching you a lesson." Nangongji glared angrily. Zhu Wujiu had actually managed to form a flash of sword chi, and now possessed the preliminary qualifications to step into the ranks of rulers. Xu Wujiu may one day become a huge problem for him, and he had originally intended to finish him off completely today. He had never thought that their battle would be interrupted with Ling Han's interference. "Brat, those who meddle too much in the affairs of others never have a good ending," he threatened. Now, it was no longer possible for him to kill Xu Wujiu on the spot, so his heart was filled with furious rage. "You either battle with me now, or get lost." "Don't babble so much," Ling Han said disdainfully. Nagongji looked very angered, yet in the end, he left in great strides with a wave of his hands. After feeling Ling Han's sword strike just now, he knew that the former was definitely not weaker than himself. Moreover, he was a cautious person, and would never go into battle unprepared. Since he was no longer able to kill Xu Wujiu, he simply chose to leave. However, judging from his character, this matter would not simply end like this. He would first investigate Ling Han's background thoroughly, and then decide what was to be done. Who's this guy, actually daring to oppose Nangongji? Should be one of the new students this year, right? From the looks of his aura, he only seems to be in the 5th layer of element gathering tier, yet he actually managed to scare off Nangongji. It's really strange. However, the Nangong clan is not to be trifled with, and there's also Nangong Xing, who is a true disciple of the academy. Forget it, we'd better not get too close to him, or we'd be inviting trouble to ourselves. The spectators discussed spiritedly, and very quickly departed from the martial training court. Xu Wujiu slowly and painstakingly got up. The special constitution of the Silver Moon race was indeed impressive. He had recovered considerably after this short period of rest, even after receiving such a serious injury. Of course, this rate of recovery could not be compared to the healing effects of the indestructible Heaven Scroll. Firstly, the indestructible Heaven Scroll was too high level, and secondly, Xu Wujiu himself was still too weak, and was unable to make full use of his special constitution's potential. "Why did you help me?" Xu Wujiu spoke. "Aren't you afraid of getting in trouble with the Nandong clan? Can it be that I helped you because I couldn't stand the injustice happening in front of me?" Ling Han said with a smile. "I don't believe that there are still such naive people in this world." Xu Wujiu shook his head. "But I live in poverty and you won't be able to get much from me, so I advise you not to waste your energy." "Then," Ling Han thought for a moment, "become my subordinate. For the aid you've provided me today, I will definitely pay you back for your kindness another day." Xu Wujiu turned around to leave, obviously unwilling to accept the offer of becoming Ling Han's subordinate. Those who managed to get into Huyang Academy were all geniuses, so how could they be willing to be under the command of someone else? Ling Han did not chase after him. Instead, he said calmly, "You don't want your revenge anymore?" Xu Wujiu's steps suddenly paused, and he slowed down. "I can teach you," Ling Han continued. "Within half a year, I will definitely be able to help you surpass Nangongji and take your revenge with your own hands." Xu Wujiu suddenly turned back round and said, "Really? You've already said that you live in poverty. What would I get from lying to you?" Ling Han said with a smile. Xu Wujiu hesitated for a moment and said, "All right, I agree to become your follower. If you are not able to help me surpass Nangongji within half a year, then this will be my payback for your help earlier. If you are able to, then my life will belong to you." This guy really was a loyal person. Still, becoming Ling Han's subordinate was in actual fact not a bad thing to happen to him. Instead, this was an opportunity of epic proportions. If it was not for the fact that Ling Han had shared an amicable friendship with the Silver Moon King years ago, he'd definitely not be wasting so much of his effort. Ling Han nodded and said, "I'll impart to you a cultivation technique, and in the future, you have to switch to practicing this cultivation technique." He lowered his voice and imparted a cultivation technique to Xu Wujiu. It was called the Silver Moon Arts. That's right, this cultivation technique was created specifically for the Silver Moon race. Years ago, after the Silver Moon race had been wiped out, Ling Han, after achieving a high cultivation level, had once journeyed all over in search of the survivors of the Silver Moon race. He didn't find anyone, but he did find this most precious cultivation technique of the Silver Moon race, the Silver Moon arts. He had an excellent memory. At the time, he had only flipped through the pages once, and managed to memorize the entirety of it. Otherwise, he would not have been able to take it out now. The Silver Moon arts, when used by a member of the Silver Moon race such as Zhu Wujiu, would fully display the might of his special constitution. At least, it would allow him to increase his battle prowess by 1 star. Moreover, the Silver Moon arts was an Earth-grade high-level technique, so it would be enough to help Zhu Wujiu very quickly catch up to Nangong Ji in cultivation level. Silver Moon Constitution and Sword Qi. If these two strengths added together still did not allow Zhu Wujiu to emerge victorious over Nangong Ji, then he was really too useless. Zhu Wujiu did not know that this was an Earth-grade high-level cultivation technique, nor did he know that it would help him make full use of the benefits of his special constitution. After asking about Ling Han's name and address, he left in a daze. After all, he was still injured, so he did need to recover. Meat. Meat. Hu Niu tugged on Ling Han's sleeve in displeasure. All right, let's go have some meat, Ling Han said with a laugh. Ling Han. Brother Ling. Ling Han heard someone shout his name from a distance, and when he looked over, it was 4 of his old friends from Biyuan City, Qi Yongyi, Jin Wuji, Bailey Tingyun, and Li Dongyu. Brother Ling came really late. Today, you must punish yourself with drinking 3 cups of wine, Bailey Tingyun said. How could 3 cups be enough? There should be at least 10 cups. Li Dongyu joined in on the banter. Meat. 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 Hu Niu jumped up and down. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Let's go, I'll treat you guys to a meal today, and if you're not drunk by the end of it, you can't leave. Nobody's leaving if they're not drunk. Qi Yongyi and the others laughed. The group of 5 adults plus 1 child exited the academy, found a restaurant and began their drinking spree. Yet Qi Yongyi and the others very quickly discovered gloomily that when a dish was served and there was meat in it, it would be instantly devoured by Hu Niu, not even leaving any scraps behind. They then entered into the fierce battle for food, but if you were talking about eating, who would be able to snatch food faster than Hu Niu? The little girl didn't even use chopsticks, and after using her bare hands to hold onto the food, how could the others find the desire to eat? This girl's stomach is a bottomless pit, right? Qi Yongyi and the others were all very curious, but not even Qi Yongyi recognized that the little girl in front of him was the one from the wrestling ring. After all, at that time, Hu Niu was very disheveled and completely filthy, unlike how she was now. And now, while she was still very wild, she looked very pretty and dainty, like a little porcelain doll. I am really envious of Brother Ling. You're already a true disciple from the moment you enroll in the academy, and can get your hands on uncountable resources for cultivation. Li Dongyu said ruefully. Qi Yongyi nodded and said, There is really too much of a gap between true disciples and ordinary disciples. The gap between myself and Feng Yan hadn't really been very big, but now, AI. 4th Prince, no matter what, at least you still have the royal house of the Deyuan King supporting you, so you're already much better than the rest of us, Jin Wuji said immediately. That's right, the resources from the royal house of the Deyuan King are even more abundant than the resources of all our 4 great parties added together. If you're going to complain about being poor, how are we supposed to go on? Bailey Tingyun called out. Ling Han, I heard you have some grudges with Feng Luo. He's also entered the academy now, so you have to be careful. He might ask Feng Yan to deal with you, Qi Yongyi said all of a sudden. Chapter 98. Chapter 98. Lick My Shoes. Feng Yan? The corners of Ling Han's lips turned up into a smile, and he said, How powerful is he now? No one's really clear about exactly how powerful he is now. But the last time he returned to the academy, he was already in the 4th layer of Gushing Spring Tier. Plus, when someone saw him make a move in an ancient historical site, he had 4 flashes of saber qi. Qi Yongyi said solemnly. 4th layer of Gushing Spring Tier was even higher than Kenye's cultivation level. However, the change of core disciples was the same as the change of true disciples. It could only happen at the end of every year, whereupon challenges would be issued to determine who would be replaced and who would remain. Feng Yan most likely had just broken through. Moreover, cultivation level did not represent one's battle prowess. Kenye's battle prowess was at 7 stars, so Feng Yan had not issued challenges to Kenye, Zhao Huan, or Qi Fengyan last month. Oh, right, before I came, I received the news that the Spiritual Treasures Pavilion will be holding an auction tonight. Anyone interested to go take a look? Jin Wuji asked all of a sudden. Spiritual Treasures Pavilion? Ling Han asked curiously. That's an auction house of the Imperial City. The boss is enshrouded in mystery. According to rumors, nobody knows who he is, not even if the boss is a man or a woman, nor whether he or she is old or young. However, he or she must definitely come from a very important background, because no one has ever dared to make trouble at Spiritual Treasures Pavilion. Jin Wuji explained. It's not that nobody dared to make trouble, it's that those who have made trouble before have all died. Thus, nobody dares to make trouble anymore, Qi Yongyi said. He could be considered as a member of the royal family, and so knew more than Jin Wuji. Interesting, then let's go have a look, Ling Han said with a smile. If he could obtain a few of the other necessary drugs to concoct the Restore Spirit pill at this auction house, then it wouldn't be too long before he could heal Ling Dongxing's spirit base. After he breaks through to Gushing Spring Tier, he'd be able to train his divine sense. The stronger his divine sense was, the higher the grade of alchemical pills he could concoct. But the temperature of the flames he could produce was still a problem, for the temperature could only be increased by advancing in cultivation level. No matter how skilled he was at controlling the heat of the flames, there was always a maximum limit to the temperature of the flame. Father's lifespan is limited, so this cannot be delayed for too long, he thought. Either I find someone to help me concoct the pill, or I fuse my flames with the strange fires of heaven and earth. With the help of the strange fires, the temperature of the flames can be increased. However, the strange fires are much too rare. Even in my last life, I had never found a strange fire. But 10,000 years have passed, so perhaps my luck will change. The strange fires were a type of spiritual fire formed naturally by the environment. Should a martial artist refine a strange fire, he'd be able to increase his cultivation level, or form a special physical constitution. For alchemists, if they were able to fuse their flames with a strange fire, they'd be able to increase their alchemy skill. Years ago, there had been a relatively unknown alchemist who had happened to fuse his flames with one of the strange fires, and eventually became a world-famous Grandmaster alchemist. If Ling Han wanted to concoct the Restore Spirit pill within a short period of time, then fusing his flames with a strange fire seemed to be his only option. The greatest alchemist in Rain Country was only at Black Grade high level, and was absolutely not qualified enough to concoct an Earth Grade alchemical pill. They had mostly finished eating, so they paid the bill and left, heading towards the Spiritual Treasures Pavilion to take part in the auction that would be held there. Because it was not too far away, they did not hail down a carriage, and instead simply went there on foot. About 20 minutes later, they had finally arrived at the Spiritual Treasures Pavilion. This was a place that was specifically meant for the sale of treasures. What would be considered a treasure? Weapons, cultivation techniques, martial arts techniques, alchemical pills, and medicinal ingredients could all be considered treasures as long as they had a high enough value, and could be sold here. There would be an auction held here every month to sell off some rarer, more valuable treasures, and every several months or years, there would be a large-scale auction which, according to rumors, would even move the hearts of the imperial family and the 8 great clans. The auction that would be held today was the monthly auction. As such, there weren't many powerful warriors among the participants, but there was indeed a lot of people. It was only held once a month, after all, so there was a lot of rare, precious treasures that were going to be auctioned off. They were just about to enter when they saw 2 young men walk towards them. These 2 young men were walking quite closely together, and from the looks of it, they had a very close relationship. It's you! When one of them saw Ling Han, his expression turned cold. He pointed a finger at Ling Han and said, "Ha ha ha, you stupid brat, you never thought this would happen, right? I still managed to enter into Huyang Academy and I've even broken through to Element Gathering Tier." It was really too much of a coincidence. This guy was Feng Luo, but the fact that he had actually broken through to Element Gathering Tier was a bit unexpected. Based on his natural talent, he should not have been able to break through to Element Gathering Tier so quickly. However, in Ling Han's eyes, he was only a minor character, thus Ling Han did not take him to heart. He merely said calmly, "Remove your finger. If not, I do not mind breaking it for you." Feng Luo's face instantly looked enraged, but when he recalled Ling Han's battle prowess, he could not help fear creeping into his heart, and withdrew his finger. Yet his mouth continued to say, "So what if you snatched away my place of enrollment into the academy? My brother still managed to help me enter the academy. Ling Han, let me tell you, don't think you can enjoy your days in the future. I will definitely destroy you." Feng Yan really did have his way, still actually managed to procure a place of enrollment into Huyang Academy for his brother. Most likely, he was the same as Ling Dongxing, and made some kind of deal with the academy. Otherwise, no matter how much of a genius you were, it was impossible for the academy to place so much importance on you that they'd freely gift you a place of enrollment into the academy. Ling Han laughed in spite of himself, and said, "Idiots who dare to threaten me this way have never had good endings." "What big talk?" the young man beside Feng Luo said. His face was filled with arrogance exceeding even Feng Luo's, his nostrils raised so high they were about to point skywards. "I have seen quite a number of arrogant people in this imperial city, but someone like you, TSK, this is the first time." "Hee Ling Han, do you know who this is?" Feng Luo asked proudly, and pointing at his companion said, "This is Wei Lu, young Master Wei. A rising star of the Huyang Academy, who would one day definitely become a black-grade alchemist." "So that is Wei Lu?" Jin Wuji gasped in surprise. "Is he very strong?" Bailey Tingyan asked. "But he's only in the first layer of Element Gathering Tier, right?" The first layer of Element Gathering Tier. Even if he was a freak like Ling Han, it was absolutely useless. Against an opponent of the 9th layer of Element Gathering Tier, the only result would be being single-handedly dominated by his much stronger opponent. Bailey Tingyun had just entered the Huyang Academy, so he did not know that there was an alchemy department, and was unable to make head or tail of Jin Wuji's reaction. "He is extremely talented in the field of alchemy, and is already a yellow-grade high-level alchemist. Some say that even the headmaster of the alchemy department has the intention to take him in as his personal disciple," Jin Wuji said in awe. When he saw the incomprehension still on Bailey Tingyun and Li Dongyu's faces, he continued to explain, and said, "The Huyang Academy is actually divided into two, which are the martial arts department and the alchemy department. The headmaster of the alchemy department is a black-grade high-level alchemist. Hiss!" At this moment, Bailey Tingyun and Li Dongyu took a sharp breath as they finally came to understand the background of Wei Lu. Black-grade high-level alchemist. Even if Shu Hexian and Zhang Weishan saw him, they would still have to treat him with utmost respect and address him as Grand Master. "Ha ha!" Wei Lu laughed loudly. He hadn't said anything just now to give them a chance to understand fully his background, which would allow him to show off to the greatest level. He regarded them with disdain and said, "I don't care what kind of grudges you guys have with young Master Luo, but since I have seen it today, then I'll act as the mediator." He paused for a moment, then said to Ling Han in a deep voice, "Kneel down, and lick young Master Luo's shoes clean." Feng Luo was extremely proud of himself. Today, with Wei Li's support, if Ling Han did not submit, that would mean opposing Wei Lu. Who was Wei Lu? He was a yellow-grade high-level alchemist, and could even possibly be taken by Wu Songlin as disciple, with endless future prospects ahead of him. Anyone with a working brain would definitely not dare to go against Wei Lu. Today, he would be getting his payback, with interest. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.